Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if neglected Naruto 3 Sword Style Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A man was walking along a dirt road surrounded by large trees. His long wavy silver hair swayed in the slight breeze and the sun's rays washed down upon him. Just about anyone would say that he was oddly dressed. He had an yellowish-orange colored button shirt and brown-spotted, greenish shorts. His fashion statement was completed with a white hooded cloak with a green lining. As for his facial appearance, he wore rounded frameless glasses which partially hid a vertical scar over his right eye and had a silver beard arranged in a stripe-like pattern across his lower jaw. His skin was rather tanned and he had large muscles on his neck and shoulders which were visible. His name was Rayleigh and he used the surname Silvers, but many decades previously it had been Uzumaki, and his silver hair had been red. The few people that knew him would be surprised at his current serious demeanor and sad face. He was known for being a light-hearted and fun-loving person. Today was not one of those days, and this week had started out rather bad. He was trying to enjoy his retirement when he overheard that the Kyuubi had attacked Konoha and been defeated by the Yondaime. It had been nearly a year since he had visited Konoha, and the only reason he had visited was to see Uzumaki Kushina, as no one else in Konoha held any interest to him anymore. Rayleigh was one of only a handful of people that knew Kushina was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, and one of an even a fewer numbered group that knew she was the second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. When he was a genin in Uzumaki, Uzumaki Mito had been his jonin sensei. After she was married to the first Hokage, and became the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, he had always visited her regularly, as did the other surviving member of his genin team. The third member had perished during the Second Shinobi War. Rayleigh could never forget that day, and after Mito's passing, Kushina inheriting her burden, Rayleigh had checked in on Kushina every now and then. It was nice knowing that there was someone left of their village and clan, who would pass on their knowledge to a future generation. He had never had children, and neither did his teammate. His sensei had a child, but because of the Kyuubi, their Uzumaki heritage was mostly covered up, and any teachings that were from Uzumaki were passed off as being that of the Senju clan. Even the last remaining relative of his deceased sensei, Senju Tsunade, had no idea her grandmother was from a different village or that the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead was based off a few injutsu from Uzumaki. Kushina was the last person left who would be able to pass on that knowledge to any future children, but now he knew that she was dead. The Kyuubi had somehow been released and another Uzumaki had left the world. Her husband the Yondaime was also dead, and he had the feeling that the Kyuubi was not defeated as the rumors had said. He was now on his way to Konoha to find out exactly what happened. Inside Konoha, Rayleigh whistled at the sight of a large hole in the defensive wall that surrounded the Leaf Village. A 400-foot section was almost finished being rebuilt by dozens of workers, and there was also damage to a small portion of the village. It had been nearly 2 weeks since the Kyuubi attack, and they were just about finished with the wall and buildings. I can't believe in all the years I have been breaking into this village that they have never once bothered to change the access code to the barrier that is supposed to protect the village from intruders, thought Rayleigh idly while shaking his head. It had been easier to sneak into the village this time because of the damage to the wall and the distracted ninja, but he had never had a problem breaking in at any other time previously. Even during 2 ninja wars, he had managed to sneak into the hidden Leaf Village. Now I'd better find out what exactly happened, were the thoughts going through Rayleigh's head as he made his way to the Hokage Tower. He didn't bother trying to hide his face or take any backstreets to the tower. Instead, he made his way down the main street straight to the tall red building. There was once a time when he had been known as an exceptional shinobi, and his team were known to be quite skilled. They never had summoning contracts like the Densetsu no Sannin, but he knew that his team, in their prime, could go head-to-head with the 3 legendary ninja without their large summons. Those days had passed though, and he wasn't even in a bingo book anymore. Only a handful of people in the village would even recognize him. As Rayleigh walked down the dirt road with and against a steady stream of people, he noticed that the ninja were still wearing the symbol of Uzumaki on the village standard uniform. This actually made him rather sad and annoyed. Sad because of the feeling it brought up, and annoyed because they were wearing it in the first place. Konoha and Uzumaki had been allies, and after the loss of his village and Mito's passing, Sarutobi had placed the symbol on the Leaf's ninja uniform in remembrance to the alliance, but now it had no real meaning. The people wearing those uniforms had no idea of its significance for Konoha or Uzumaki, and only wore it because it was sold on the standard uniform. They wore the symbol of his once great village in complete ignorance. To Rayleigh, that symbol had great deal of meaning, and it seemed rather insulting for them to wear it so brazenly without knowing anything about it, or what it stood for. No one probably even mentioned it at the Village Ninja Academy, or the significance of it in the Leaf Village's symbol worn on their forehead protectors. Just something else that has been lost to the passage of time. Sometimes the longevity of those from Uzumaki can be more of a curse than a gift. Rayleigh thought sadly and continued on while ignoring the crowds. Had he been paying more attention to the voices, he would have heard talk of a certain baby as well as talk about the Yondaime, demons, monsters, revenge, and the Kyuubi. Hokage Tower. I'd like to speak to the monkey in charge of this place. Rayleigh said to the secretary in a serious tone but with a faint hint of a smile on his lips. The poor woman looked up at him from her paperwork and said rather indignantly, "Excuse me," I said, "I'd like to speak to the monkey they have running this place. It's rather important. Could you point me in the direction of his cage so that I can talk with him?" Repeated Rayleigh in a higher voice and having a harder time holding back his smile. He could sense Sarutobi in the Hokage's office and he decided to take a break from his sad demeanor to have a laugh to brighten things up. He could easily sense the hidden ANBU who were getting ready to pounce should anything happen. The secretary's mouth just seemed to open and close without a word's coming out. She really didn't know how to respond, and dealing with crazies wasn't in her job description. She was about to signal to the ANBU when the door to the Hokage's office opened. "It's no problem, Aiko-san, I'll fit him into my schedule," came the deep and annoyed voice of the Sandaime Hokage. The ANBU relaxed. The Rayleigh calmly walked into the office and shut the door. The newly named secretary, Aiko, just sighed and got back to her work. Hokage's office. "I have a feeling that I know why you are here," said the Hokage to his guest as he offered a chair to the man and sat himself down in his chair behind his desk. "Your cage hasn't changed much since the last time I saw you here, and I see they've even given you a fresh supply of paperwork," replied Rayleigh in a jovial voice while smiling and inspecting the room. The Hokage merely sweat dropped. Rayleigh's smile ended and he became serious as he saw the Hokage was in no mood for any banter. "I'd like to know what happened, and I don't want some shortened story to keep me from finding out the rest while keeping the real version of events to yourself," said Rayleigh in a serious tone. The Hokage's frown increased and he knew that the man in front of him had lived long enough to possibly determine if he was telling the whole truth or just a modified version to keep him from prying any further. "I don't completely know what happened, but the Kyuubi managed to escape from Kushina and appeared at the walls of the village. I know that at one point the Kyuubi was being controlled, but I have no idea by who. Minato managed to transport it away from the village where he used the dead demon-consuming seal to stop the Kyuubi," replied the Hokage. Rayleigh's eyes widened at the mention of the jutsu used, as it was a powerful kenjutsu. "Why did Kushina's seal fail and where is the Kyuubi?" was Rayleigh's next question. The Hokage sighed as he knew the man was not going to accept anything less than the absolute truth. "The seal was weakened and I told you what happened to the Kyuubi. So Kushina was pregnant?" was the surprised response to the Hokage's explanation, and Sandaime winced slightly as Rayleigh obviously knew far more about the seal than he had anticipated, as the seal would only weaken during a pregnancy when giving birth. "Yes, she was pregnant and taken outside the village along with my wife, the yondaime, a nurse, and 3 trusted ANBU to give birth to her child. They were protected with the most powerful barrier we have, but someone managed to get through. We found the guards, the nurse, and my wife all dead," the Hokage said in an unsteady voice. Rayleigh nodded and gave his condolences to the Hokage for his loss. "So Kushina perished when the Kyuubi was removed and the yondaime perished while sealing the Kyuubi." He received a nod from the Hokage and continued, "Where is the Kyuubi?" asked Rayleigh in a serious tone. The Sandaime answered, "As I already said, the Kyuubi was sealed by Minato with the dead demon-consuming seal." Rayleigh eyed the Hokage and tried to determine whether this was the whole truth or another of Sarutobi's half-truths. "What of the child? Did he survive?" asked Rayleigh in a slightly strained voice. The Hokage mentally sighed as he had managed to not give away too much information and answered, "Yes, he is fine. Minato and Kushina decided to call him Naruto, and he is registered under Kushina's surname for safety reasons. Since he doesn't have any family, he was placed in the orphanage." Rayleigh thought about this. He doesn't have anyone else, and he is Kushina's child. "I always made sure to stop and see Kushina once in a while just to make sure she was alright. We weren't exactly immediate family, but we are both a part of the same clan. My retirement isn't exactly what I pictured it to be, but I'm really too old to look after a child. There's no one else to teach him, but I know more about his Uzumaki heritage than almost anyone else alive in the elemental countries. Kushina would have taught him our few in jutsu, but she didn't know any of the other jutsu and secret techniques of our village. IV mastered them. Ali could teach him. I may not have very many years left, but I can still teach him all that I can. That way Yuzashio and the Uzumaki clan won't be completely forgotten. I've sought out other survivors, but none of them have any ambitions to become a ninja or for their children to become ninja. He's the last of our clan left," were some of the many thoughts running through the silver-haired man's mind. Thus far, the life of Silver's Rayleigh had been a good one, but he had many regrets. He couldn't save his teammate, and he couldn't stop the destruction of his village. He had drifted apart from his surviving teammate, and only stopped by to see her once or twice a year. He never had a family or any children, and the few students he taught had perished with the destruction of the village. Now one of the last surviving members of his village was gone, and Yuzashio would probably be completely forgotten. He doubted he had a decade left in his long lifespan, but he would try. "So he doesn't have any left to take care of him?" he asked the Hokage. The Hokage realized where this might be going, and he tried to change the man's mind. "Are you sure you should be even considering taking care of a child at your age? I can't even imagine how difficult it would be to try that again, and I'm younger than you," the Hokage said while trying to give a kind smile. Rayleigh, on the other hand, could tell the smile was fake and decided to push farther. "Oh, I'll be fine. I'm sure I can find or hire someone to help me until he is out of diapers. We can just say that I am his godfather or something," replied Rayleigh with a real smile on his face and losing much of his previous melancholy. I really don't, but the Hokage was cut off by a piercing stare from Rayleigh. What aren't you telling me, Sarutobi? Interrupted Rayleigh. In all the time he had met the older silver-haired man, he had never been able to shake off or deal with the man's stare when he was being completely serious. The man's eyes could go from enthusiasm and happiness to a set of sharp kunai in an instant. He had even witnessed the man knock out Chunin and Jonin with just his stare, in something which resembled the temporary paralysis technique, except it put them unconscious for a couple of hours and did not just hinder their movements. It was this intense stare that the Hokage was now trying to deal with and was actually failing. He already has a godfather, was all that the Sandaime managed to get out, and even then he really didn't want to tell the man that much. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed and he asked, where is this person and why aren't they taking care of him then? Rayleigh did release his stare and let the Hokage talk. Minato and Kushina made Jiraiya the boy's godfather. Jiraiya already came to the village and left. I don't think he is coming back anytime soon after the death of his student. He didn't even show up at the funeral. Though he was never one to show up at funerals anyway, replied the Hokage. He was starting to get frustrated with having to reveal this information to someone who was not part of the village and did not need to know. So that perverted student of yours ran away, Rayleigh said and frowned. I don't see what this has to do with anything. There's something else you're not telling me? So Minato didn't steal the Kyuubi away completely and sealed the rest in his son, said Rayleigh sadly as his mind put together what must have happened. Did you really think I would care about that? I'm still willing to take care of the boy regardless of the Kyuubi. It would be better if I did take care of him, considering I have the most experience with seals than anyone else in the village now, and know more about that seal in particular than anyone else in the elemental countries. Sarutobi winced and Rayleigh knew that there was more. I can't let you take care of him, or anyone take care of him for that matter. It was an agreement by the Shinobi Council. Every Shinobi clan fought over how the boy should be taken care of, and that was the final decision, that he should be placed into the orphanage and be put into the ninja academy when he reaches the required age, said the Sandaime. Rayleigh looked rather confused at this revaluation. I thought only the Hokage and the village elders were to know about the Kyuubi being sealed. You told all the clan heads? Asked Rayleigh, and his voice raised on the last sentence. Sarutobi sighed heavily and looked down while refusing to meet the eyes of the other person in the room. He finally spoke moments later. I decided that after the attack, the village deserved to know about the sealing and how the Yondaime died. You told the whole village? Rayleigh said in a deadly voice, and both his chakra and killing intent flared up. What's the matter with you, Sarutobi? Have you gone senile? You just decided to tell the entire village about the Kyuubi being sealed into the boy and broke a secret that has been kept for longer than you have been alive. It was made secret to protect the Jinchuriki from inside and outside threats, and you just decided to throw that to the wind, shouted Rayleigh even more intensely than before. I had no idea that the villagers would act the way that they did. I thought they would welcome him as a hero like the Yondaime wanted. I didn't know that they would call for his death, replied the Hokage. If anything, this actually made Rayleigh even more angry. Rayleigh didn't move from his spot or show any emotion on his face. He had tilted his head so that his glasses hid his eyes, but the Hokage could still feel the anger and killing intent radiating from the man. The Hokage contemplated calling for his ANBU but would try to defuse the situation first. The council decided it would be best to put the boy in the orphanage, which was better than the alternatives. I don't like it any more than you, but I can't look after the boy myself, and I can't let you look after him, no matter how much I want to. Naruto will be fine in the orphanage. After he has become a ninja, I will inform him of his burden, and after he has graduated to the rank to Jonin, I will tell him of his parents, the Hokage said while trying to discern any reaction from the man in front of him. The room was thick with tension. The ANBU arrived in the room and were ready to attack with weapons drawn. Reinforcements would arrive shortly. The Hokage was ready to fight if necessary, but hoped that Rayleigh would calm down and accept the situation. It was a few tense moments before Rayleigh spoke in a calm but deadly tone. That's not good enough. You're a fool, Sarutobi. That fact has become more apparent with age, it seems. While you have doomed the boy to a terrible life within the village, I won't accept it. It would be too difficult to take the boy outside of the village because you will come after me, but that doesn't mean that I won't look after the boy inside of the village. I am not a ninja of Konoha, or citizen of the village, and I won't be following the decrees of an inept old man and a council of idiots anytime soon. As soon as Rayleigh finished, the ANBU attacked, and in the moment before they struck he looked up and narrowed his eyes. The result of this simple gesture was not what anyone was expecting. The ANBU that were about to strike him were blown back by a force and was produced by the man. It was some kind of technique that faintly resembled that of a wind jutsu, and had an overpowering effect on those present. They collapsed on the floor in a heap and were completely unconscious while foaming at the mouth. The Hokage was in no better shape. He was not thrown back but was knocked out by a pulse that emanated from the man in front of him. It radiated out from his eyes and seemed to produce a visible wave that passed over everyone in the room, and the ANB that had just arrived at the window. The windows in the room were all cracked, and when it was over, everyone but Rayleigh was unconscious. Maybe I overdid it? Said the man before he disappeared in a burst of smoke that indicated the use of shadow clone, and that the real Rayleigh had never been in the room in the first place. Of course, no one was conscious to figure this out. Dango restaurant. Damn! Came the response of oddly dressed old man sitting at a Dango restaurant as he banged on the table. Several guests were startled at his outburst. He had found the place after a little searching and had just ordered a large plate of dango when the memories from his shadow clone had reached him. He looked at the plate and realized that he couldn't take it with him, so he looked around and saw a sad purple-haired girl sitting in the corner eating slowly from a small plate of dango. Rayleigh smiled as he got an idea. Same restaurant. It was official. Mitarashi Enko was having one of her worst birthdays ever. The young Chunin was stuck doing a D-rank mission in the morning to help with the reconstruction, and that meant she couldn't get a higher-paying C rank. She needed to pay her rent, and thus she was stuck with almost no money left over for anything else. She didn't have any savings and lived from mission to mission. That meant no birthday meal nor any present that she would have to buy herself. The Chunin didn't have many friends, and even then they weren't really close friends. The best she could do was a few sticks of dango. Not that she was complaining about dango, she loved dango. Unfortunately, she could only buy a few sticks as compared to her usual family-sized platter. The only things that happened which was good was that the majority of the village were focused on hating the QB container, and not solely her for once. She was broken out of her thoughts by a loud curse. She looked up and found an oddly dressed man looking around the restaurant. His eyes settled on her and hesmoled. Great, I don't know why that perverted old geezer is smiling, but if he tries anything, he'll get a crotch full of kunai. She thought as she eyed the man and fingered a kunai underneath the table. The man picked up his platter of dango and walked towards her. He stopped when he was at her table and his smile got even bigger as he spoke. Unfortunately, I have some business to take care of, so here he put his platter dango in front of her. You can have this. Also, he moved inside his cloak and Anko tense ready to parry an attack, but he pulled out a wallet. Here is enough to cover the food and leave a tip. Do you happen to know where the orphanage is by any chance? The man asked, the smile never leaving his face. 800 down the main street, then you turn left onto Nidame Street and take it to the end. It should be right there. Anko replied in a confused voice. The man smiled, handed her the money and left, presumably to the orphanage. Anko blinked olishly several times and looked down at the family-sized platter of dango, which was exactly what she had wanted earlier. Then she looked at the wad of cash that appeared to be several times more than what the man should have left. How things are looking up for once. That old man left me the dango that I wanted and more money than I need. Just enough to buy something nice. It's like my wish came true. Narrowing her eyes, Anko looked around cautiously and then said, Orochimaru's head on a silver platter. Of course nothing happened and she knew that it wouldn't happen, but on the off chance that it could have happened, she was not going to waste the opportunity. Well, I guess you can't get everything, but this is probably the best birthday I've had in years. And with that sad thought, she began devouring the platter of dango and thinking about what she would buy with the extra money. Maybe that trench coat that she always wanted. Orphanage. Rayleigh knew that he had little time, and he needed to act fast. Displaying speed that was unknown for someone of his age, he raced in the direction that the girl had told him. His clone was right in thinking that it was too difficult to take the boy outside of the village. He would have nearly every ninja in the village on his tail, and he doubted he could keep ahead of teams of ANBU and tracking squads for very long. He didn't have the stamina that he used to. He could barely make 4 shadow clones without tiring himself out anymore, which was a far cry from his younger years. Running from a village of shinobi while carrying a child was out of the question. He still had a plan though, and it might work too. He just needed to accomplish several things in the time it took for the Hokage, or his guards, to wake up. The girl's information about the location of the orphanage had been correct, and walked right in. Getting past the ANBU guarding the orphanage was rather easy. The man wasn't even paying attention. Once inside of the building, he was met by the receptionist. The head of the receptionist was lifting from reading through the paperwork on her desk, and Rayleigh acted before she could see him. He released enough of his haki to make her fall unconscious. He really didn't like using that technique on someone that was just a civilian and no threat to him, but time was of the essence, and he had to get to the boy fast. He looked through the files and found the Uzumaki Naruto on one of the files. Stopping to ask one of the children there about where the nursery was, he hinged into the women at the front desk to avoid knocking out anyone else. One would think that it would be difficult to find a baby, especially when you don't even know what the infant looked like in the first place, but that proved not to be an obstacle. Uzumaki Naruto seemed to be the only baby in the nursery that was crying, and nobody was bothering to check on. His gaze passed the nurse, and she didn't even seem to acknowledge that blonde-haired boy was crying. He moved through several hand seals and placed a genjutsu over the nurse to keep her from noticing him. Since she was a civilian, it was easy to place and keep the jutsu up. While still disguised, Rayleigh picked up the baby and looked at him curiously. The boy stopped crying as soon as he was picked up. He has his father's hair and a combination of their eyes, but his face seems to resemble more his mother. Where did those whisker marks come from? Neither Kushina-chan, Mito-sensei, or any other member of the Uzumaki clan had marks like that. Perhaps because he is the son of a Jinchuriki, but Mito-sensei's child never had marks like that either. Strange, I wonder if he had them before or after the sealing? No one else in Yuzushio had any kind of marks like that, and neither did Minato. Though I have idea about any of Minato's family, were Rayleigh's thoughts as he held the boy. He looked into the blue eyes that seemingly stared back, and he had the feeling that he was doing the right thing for the boy. Getting back to the situation at hand, Rayleigh moved out of the nursery with the boy and headed for a back door which he believed was an exit to the building. He didn't even have to explain why he was kidnapping a child because he didn't pass anyone save for the nurse he passed on the way in, and she was still under the genjutsu. Hopefully he still had time before the Hokage woke and started a village-wide search, and hopefully Naruto would stay quiet. He still needed to send a message to his former teammate. He had no idea how to take care of a baby, and even though she had never had any kids herself, he remembered that she did have some experience taking care of babies. It may have been a D-rank mission that they performed in Uzushio, or something along those lines. What he did know was that he was in over his head on this one, and needed her for backup. I just hope she can help me for an extended period of time. I'm not sure if she'll be willing to leave her bar in the hands of someone else for that long. Also, whatever else she happens to be doing on the side. Shaki always has more going on in that bar than meets the eye. Whether information brokering, buying and selling valuable/stolen items, gambling, or even a loan shark. The woman does it all while inconspicuously being a small bar that only serves food and drink. Of course, she always charges insane prices and rips off every customer that enters the place, thought Rayleigh with a smile on his face as he thought about what his former teammate and that rip-off bar of hers. 20 minutes after the kidnapping of blonde-haired Jinchuriki from the local orphanage, a tall thin woman walked through the front gates Konoha. Her skin was tanned and she had short black hair with 2 tufts/bangs pointing forward. She was dressed in tight giraffe pattern pants and a purple shirt with a black spider design on the front that showed a good amount of cleavage. Of course, if anyone actually figured out just how old she was, they would first be shocked and then jealous because she had very few wrinkles for her old age. She looked just like she had decades before. Over the shirt she had a black coat with bluish stripes down the sleeves, and she wore a golden beaded necklace. Before walking up to the guard post at the gate, she looked around the village seeing what had changed, and then tapped the ash from her cigarette onto the ground. Her facial expression remained emotionless as she approached the 2 Chunin guards at the gate. Unlike her teammate, she decided to use the direct approach to entering a ninja village. "Welcome to Konoha, do you have ID with you?" asked one of the guards. For people who were not ninja of the village, it was standard procedure check identification when they entered the village and place them on a list and also find out their reason for being in the village. "Yes, I do," the woman replied, but made no motion to show her ID to the guards. A short staring contest ensued before it was broken by the guards. "Can we see your ID?" The second guard replied in a slightly annoyed voice. "Of course, but it's going to cost you," replied the woman with a small smirk as she took out her ID but didn't show it to the guards. "Cost us? We just want to see your ID, so we can get your identity and let you into the village," the first guard asked. "To see my ID will cost you 10,000 ryo," she stated seriously, "and I think the conversion is around 0.1 dollars, so 10,000 ryo is around $1,000. If I'm wrong, then I don't care, because that is what the conversion will be from now on." 10,000? "Why would it cost us that much just to see your ID?" shouted the first guard as he stood up from his seat, while both looked shocked and confused at the woman's demands. "Information is power, and I won't go giving away valuable information about myself without a price. 10,000 ryo seems rather fair," she said in a calm voice. Both guards looked at each other, not sure what to do in this situation. In the past, people refused to show ID, which got them thrown out of the village, but no one had ever demanded money to see their ID before. This is ridiculous, they both thought. The second guard decided to make his thoughts known. "No fucking way are we paying anything to see your ID. You either show us or you can leave." The woman took a long inhale of her cigarette and let out the smoke at the 2 guards. "Then I'm afraid this is going to have to get ugly," she stated with finality. Before either guard could react, she had already moved behind them and gave them a beating that they wouldn't ever forget. Then she stole their wallets and IDs. Grocery store. At the exact same time, a blonde-haired woman with a baby walked into a local grocery store and started browsing the shelves for baby food and everything else that would be required to take care of the child. She was neither attractive nor ugly and was wearing a neutral-colored dress. The baby she was holding had the same color hair, only spiky and not wavy like his presumed mother's hair. "This should do, at least until I can get a message out to Shaki," thought the hinged woman. Rayleigh had placed a different hinge over himself, and had placed a small one over Naruto to hide his whiskers. He had been sticking to heavily crowded areas to cover his scent and find the supplies that he needed to hide out until his teammate could get there and help him. He had already sent a letter by Hawk to her bar, and he just hoped she could make it to Konoha by the following day. She only lived less than 16 kilometers away, just outside of Crater City in Fire Country. Rayleigh had yet to see any ninja searching for him and guessed that he had mere minutes before the Hokage sent out his forces on a village-wide search. Since he was completely alert for any nearby ninja, he had overheard numerous conversations of both civilian and ninja concerning the infant in his arms. It seemed the majority of the village thought the boy should be killed for what he contained. A great number either viewed the child as the Kyuubi incarnate, or that the Kyuubi would eventually rise again and either influence or escape from the boy. The only thing that people were unanimous about was their praise of the Yondaime, and his sacrifice for the village. The man had been elevated to almost a martyr status, and some were talking about finishing what the man had started and killing the Kyuubi child. Damn it, Sarutobi! What were you thinking when you told the entire village about the boy and his burden? You could have made up any story you wanted, but for some reason you decided to tell them all the truth. Even all the civilians for Kami's sake. If there are any spies in the village, it won't be long before every other hidden village knows about him being the container of the Kyuubi. I still can't believe how easy it was for me to kidnap him, thought Rayleigh angrily while he searched for supplies for himself and the baby. He had only felt one presence from a nearby ANBU at the orphanage, but that ninja wasn't even paying attention to the boy or any threats to him. The man wasn't even inside the building. I wonder what baby stuff Kushina-chan already bought for him. Rayleigh questioned himself out loud. He would find out shortly enough anyway, considering that he was going to barricade himself in the woman's house with Fuinjutsu for the next couple of years. Hokage Tower. I can't believe I was defeated that easily, and by a man decades older than me no less, thought the furious Hokage. He, along with his nearby ANBU, had been unconscious for nearly an hour before they were found and woken with smelling salts. In that time many things had happened in the village, and only some of them would make any sense once they were reported to him. Upon fully waking up, the Hokage had instantly sent several ANBU to check on Naruto at the orphanage. Although the ANBU guarding the building claimed that everything was fine, the infant was gone nonetheless, and the only evidence that anyone had been there was an unconscious secretary. After she had been woken up, she informed them that someone had entered the building, and then she just seemed to pass out. The Hokage had expected this, but what he hadn't anticipated was a Chunin had come to the tower to report that the gate guards were found beaten and crammed underneath the little booth/stand that they sat at while watching the main gate. Both weren't able to talk and were sent to the hospital. Now the Sandaime had to deal with the fact that either Rayleigh had left the village with Naruto, or that someone else was behind the beating of the Chunin guards. No one knew how long they were out, or who had left or entered the village since they had been knocked out. Both of their wallets and ninja IDs were missing. This didn't bode well at all. It meant that one or multiple people could have infiltrated the village and are now masquerading as his ninja. Rayleigh had stated that he wouldn't leave the village, but the beaten guards spoke differently, and he had no way of knowing at that moment if Naruto was inside or outside of the village. The bearded Kage had sent all of his available ninja out to search the village and had dispatched all of his tracking units to investigate the gate and the whereabouts of the unknown fugitive that had attacked the Chunin guards. He had sent only his trusted ANBU to find out Rayleigh's whereabouts. The Sandaime did not want mass civil unrest at the thought that the Kyuubi container was kidnapped, and therefore hadn't revealed to anyone that the baby was missing. He really couldn't trust that rest of the village ninja would not harm Naruto if they caught Rayleigh, and he had the feeling that if they tried to hurt the boy, then Rayleigh would kill them. The Sandaime had tried to use his crystal ball to find Naruto, but all he seemed to get was a black shroud. This meant that his technique had found the boy but was being blocked. He tried to find Rayleigh as well, but he was being blocked too. This wasn't very conclusive, as the ball could work for a radius of several miles depending on the chakra and control of the user. Rayleigh could be inside the village or several miles outside the village. He then personally went to the barrier core to try and find Naruto's chakra signature in the village. The old Hokage was relieved to sense the boy's signature inside the village walls, but he couldn't pinpoint where. The Hokage was just entering his office when one of the ANBU tracking group's body flickered inside. "Report," demanded the frustrated and stressed Hokage. Hokage-sama, the ninja turned to address the Hokage as he entered and shut the door to his office. "We examined the front gate thoroughly, but all we managed to pick up was the strong scent of cigarette smoke. It seemed to cover every scent in the area. We tried to follow the scent, but apparently many people smoke that brand of cigarettes in the village." The Hokage mentally sighed in aggravation. "Did you find out anything else?" "Hi, we discovered that the suspect was a single individual who entered the village. They weren't running or in any hurry as they walked up to the gate. We can only guess at what the person did or where they went after beating the guards, but we have several teams searching for a hinged individual using either of the Chunin's appearances or IDs," the captain of the team stated, and the Hokage nodded to them in acceptance of the report. "Have you heard anything from the other team following the kidnapper?" the Sandaime asked. The grayish-white spiky-haired ANBU captain tensed slightly at the mention of the suspect and said they were having difficulty finding his whereabouts. He seemed to enter several stores such as the Yamanaka flower shop and a scented candle store that overloading the nose of the Inuzuka member of their teams. "His Niken is still trying to find a trail, but it just seems to end," concluded the ANBU captain. "Thank you, Inu-san. I would like you to join the search party as well." "Dismissed," said the Sandaime, and the ninja before him nodded and disappeared in a blur of speed. That old bastard Rayleigh probably led them to the flower and candle shops just for shits and giggles. He could have lost them at any point before that, and I doubt he needed to visit those shops, concluded the Sandaime in his mind while shaking his head. The Hokage's trusted ANBU had already followed sighted the man several times at some random area in the village only to find nothing when they chased him. "I can't believe he's fooling my ninja with the regular clone technique," thought the Hokage sadly. It had been a long day, and it wasn't even 2 in the afternoon yet. The Sandaime already had a pounding headache. He wasn't sure if it was the situation or the fact that he slammed his head on his desk when he was knocked unconscious by Rayleigh's technique. What the hell was that technique? I'm called the Professor and the God of Shinobi, and I can't even identify what attack that was. It must have been some yin/yang nature technique. The Hokage was interrupted from his thoughts by his secretary at the door. Hokage-sama, the Shinobi Council has requested a meeting as well as the village elders. When would you like to meet with them? She asked. The Hokage's answer would have been never, but he held his tongue and decided that it was inevitable that he would have to meet with them. The kidnapping of their Jinchuriki in broad daylight was not something that he wanted to tell them about. I really need to increase village security. This is just ridiculous. One person kidnaps a child right under the nose of an ANBU and another person walks right through the front gate and beats up the guards without as much as an alarm sounding. Not to mention my personal guards, and I got knocked unconscious by an old man far past his prime. Maybe I'll mention increasing village security at the meeting. I'll leave out the part about me getting knocked out. Namake's residence, a small 2-story house in the residential area of Konoha. Rayleigh was just finishing disarming the last of the security seals and barriers on the Namake's estate. I guess I'll have to call it the Uzumaki estate from now on, though he thought as he looked down at the small blonde baby in the basket next to him. He had been given access to enter the small yard the house was on, which meant that he could bypass the powerful barrier protecting the entire estate. But there were still seals guarding the house itself which he did not have access to. It really wasn't very hard for an accomplished seal master like himself to bypass them, though. He had always liked the small 2-story home that the young couple had purchased and kept secret. According to Konoha tax and planning maps, this house didn't even exist. He doubted anyone but the Hokage, and maybe those annoying village elders knew it existed. Not even the clan heads knew about it. That meant it was perfect to hide from a village full of searching ninja. The place even had some kind of genjutsu that stopped people from being able to see into the yard or notice anyone leaving the front gate or surrounding walls. There wasn't enough room on the lot for a large training area, but he would make do in the future when he trained the boy. He was definitely starting the boy's training early, and he would try to teach him as much as possible before his time came. Most people of Uzushiogakure not only lived long lives but also were able to tell when their natural time of death came near. As their natural death from old age approached, they could even tell the day that they would die on. The lifespan of an average person from Uzushio could be anywhere from 90 to 120 years of age, with 130 being a rare maximum. Members of the Uzumaki clan had more vitality than others in Uzushio. A person from Uzushio who was 100 years old would still have the vitality of a normal person in their 80s, and an Uzumaki of the same age would have the vitality of a person in their 70s. Rayleigh himself was already 108 years old, and he could feel his natural death approaching in less than 10 years. Rayleigh's sad thoughts were cut short as he finished bypassing the last security seal on the front door. Finally, that took longer than I thought it would have. I guess Minato and Kushina really wanted to keep me out. Rayleigh joked in his mind as he pushed the stroller into the house and shut the door. I thought you would probably come here, Ray-san, said a voice from the shadows. A startled Rayleigh jumped, was instantly on the defensive, and prepared himself. He hadn't even noticed that anyone was there. The only thing he saw was a small lit ember in a shadow by the living room, and he recognized it as a cigarette. Then his mind finally recognized the voice. Kami, Shaki, you nearly gave me a heart attack, said the smiling Rayleigh to the shadowed figure as he braced himself against the wall. She really had startled him. Sure enough, his former teammate stepped out of the shadows with a cigarette in one hand and gently laughing at Rayleigh's surprise. She walked over to the stroller and looked at the cute baby. So this is Kushina's child, Ray-san? She said in a casual voice. How did you get here so fast? I just sent a letter to you not even 2 hours ago. And how did you know who this baby was? Were the questions from a confused Rayleigh. He was sure the woman before him was Shaki, but he was very confused. Letter? I never got a letter. I left my bar several hours ago to come here. I heard about the QB attack weeks ago, and calculated that it would take you this long to hear about it from the area you retired to. My intuition told me that the QB wasn't gone, and that it had been sealed inside Kushina's child. I heard from my information sources that you had left, and were on your way to Konoha. I also had a feeling that you would be here and would need my help. Shaki explained to a shocked Rayleigh. Large sweat drops had formed on the back of his head during her explanation. I've known her for almost a century, and I still can't believe how scary her woman's intuition is. Wait a minute, how did you know Kushina was pregnant? Shaki shrugged and said, we exchanged letters back and forth. I've known for months that she was pregnant. Unlike you, I can be reached by Messenger Hawk. I even got her a gift for the baby shower, though I was the only one besides the Sandame's wife who could attend. Rayleigh really wanted to face fault at that. He had to go to Sarutobi to get all of his information, and he practically had to pry it from the old monkey's hands, feet, and tail. Shaki, on the other hand, more information, and just pieced it all together by herself with guesswork. That's so scary, he thought. So, you did make sure to kidnap the right child? She asked, looking at the boy. He had Minato's hair and similar features to Kushina, but the whisker marks were new. Yep, only one in the nursery at the orphanage who was being neglected, and the name tag matched. Uzumaki Naruto, an interesting name. Though I think he might have been named him after a ramen topping, said Rayleigh with a quirky smile, and he continued, I don't know where those 6 marks came from. It makes Naruto-chan look like a little fox. They're gonna make him a cutie when he gets older. If he doesn't start hiding them," stated Shaki while rubbing the baby's whiskered cheeks while Rayleigh's sweat dropped again. He had to admit, though, it may be best to hide them. Everyone in the village seemed to know about the marks on his face and had decided that they were proof that he was the QB, or that the baby was being possessed, or some ridiculous nonsense like that. Rayleigh left the boy to Shaki and went to sit on the couch in the living room. Slumping down into the cushions, he sighed. Rayleigh had been running around the village for nearly an hour and a half while hiding from every ninja and carrying a baby with him. He took time to examine the room, and it looked exactly like it had when he last visited. He often talked with Kushina about Yuzashio and his missions, his team, and his adventures in the world. He had been around for over a century, and seen many things in his time. She and Minato would listen to his stories over food or drink. Rayleigh was always welcome there, and Kushina was always nice to him. He didn't see her as the QB and enjoyed the time he spent with her and her husband. Coming back to reality, he smiled and asked Shaki, "So what have you been up to today? I seem to remember hearing about 2 beaten-up gate guards and a fiasco about someone infiltrating the village." Shaki had placed Naruto into a carrier and taken him into the living room. She placed him beside Rayleigh and Sei in an adjacent chair and replied, "Fufufu, well, I went to the area outside the village and saw where the end of the battle took place. There was quite a bit of destruction. Minato-chan seemed to have a safe house out there and I checked, but everything had been destroyed. I then came to village and went to the records room in the administration building to make a few changes. You are now listed as a civilian of Fire Country living in Konoha under your alias of Silver Rayleigh. Congratulations, you adopted Uzumaki Naruto around an hour ago," she said as she handed him the adoption forms from a pocket inside her coat. "I even got them approved by the Hokage, and according to your will, he is set to inherit everything you own when you pass on. This house is also listed in the will even though it doesn't exist on any map or in the village records, but there's a deed to the house sealed into a storage seal on the will along with information on all your holding and accounts." "I have a will?" asked Rayleigh disbelievingly, trying to keep up with all the information she was giving him. Shaki merely smiled and pulled a folded letter out of her coat pocket again and handed it to him. "Here, I made a copy so you could read it." Rayleigh accepted the letter and read through it. It read through as a standard will, and it was signed by himself, had a notary stamp, and was approved by the Hokage. "You forged my signature perfectly. How in the world did you get the Hokage's approval, especially on the adoption form?" "It was easier than I thought it would be. I thought I might have to seduce the old monkey, but when I went into his office, he was unconscious along with many of his ANBU. I just borrowed his approval stamp and approved all of the documents that I needed. He started to come around, so I also put him under a genjutsu and had him sign off on a few things. Like the deed to this house, for instance, and a few other things that you don't need to concern yourself with," Shaki said as if it was no big deal. Rayleigh eyed the woman wearily. "When did she find out about my holdings and bank account numbers? Or learn to forge my signature for that matter? What else did she get Sarutobi to sign? I'd better just skip asking her about that and the gate guards. It's obvious to me that she beat them nearly to death," were the thoughts going through his mind as it tried to wrap around just what his former teammate had been up to in a few hours. As soon as his mind finished going over everything she told him, he couldn't help but laugh out loud at the situation. They hadn't been on a team in decades, but they still had excellent teamwork. While he grabbed the child, she covered just about everything else. "I see you've been pretty busy too. Attacking the Hokage and his ninja, kidnapping, leading the village on a wild chase, buying baby supplies, breaking and entering, and it looks like one of your shadow clones is outside adding some more security to the house and yard. I better feed Naruto-chan, he looks hungry. When do you think we should let Saren know where we are and let him call of his annoying wasps?" stated Shaki as she picked up Naruto and looked out the window to see numerous shinobi combing the village and searching for them, well, mainly Rayleigh. They still didn't know what she looked like and wouldn't until those Chunin woke up and gave a description. "Do you still have that summoning contract of yours?" Rayleigh asked Shaki as she started feeding Naruto. "Yes." "You better write a message and then I'll summon one of my little birds to send it." Rayleigh nodded and went to get supplies to write a letter to Sarutobi. Unfortunately, he had no idea what he was going to say. Hokage Tower. It was now mid-afternoon, and wherever Rayleigh was hiding, he had picked a good place. The Sandame's ninja hadn't been able to find him, or the other intruder that entered the village. Both had seemingly disappeared, but the Hokage did know from the barrier core that the baby was still in the village. "I really should have put a tracking seal on that baby," were the Hokage's current thoughts. Then again, Rayleigh probably would have found it, and removed it already. The Sandame was completely stressed out, and really wanted hurt something. Preferably Rayleigh. He really wanted to summon Enma, have the Monkey King transform into his bow staff, and beat some sense into the man. The Sandame was supposed to take care of Naruto, and now the boy was kidnapped. The Hokage didn't even know where the blonde baby was. To make matters worse, he would have to tell the council something about what had happened. He hadn't told any of the council, or the village elders what was going on. 3 hours ago, this whole fiasco started and his ninja had been searching for 2. His meeting with the Shinobi Council and village elders was a half hour from now, and the Sandame was dreading it. So far, the village did not know that Naruto was kidnapped. What they did know was that a fugitive was hiding in the village, and the village ninja were trying to find them. Only his trusted ANBU were searching for Rayleigh and Naruto, and only they knew that the boy was kidnapped. The remaining ninja were searching for the unknown fugitive. A poof of smoke erupted on the Sandame's desk that demanded his full attention. The smoke dispersed and revealed larger than average swallow that was standing on top of a scroll. The bird chirped at him, and then disappeared in another smaller puff of smoke. For several seconds the Sandame stared at the scroll while taking a puff from his pipe. He didn't detect any chakra buildup from the scroll or any other sign that would be present if it was a trap or trick. He picked up the thin scroll and opened it. Written on the inside was a letter to him. It read, "Dear Sarutobi-san, by now you know exactly what I've done." In the storage seal at the bottom of the scroll are several documents. The top one is a copy of Naruto's adoption form. You don't need to worry about anything because you already signed them. The Hokage released the storage seal and looked at the copy of the adoption forms. "Dear Kami, that is my signature and a forgery of Jiraiya's. It's even been approved with my stamp. As you can see from the forms, I am now Naruto's legal guardian and those documents are legal unless you prove otherwise. You don't have to worry about me leaving the village because I intend to stay for a while. I already found someone to help with raising Naruto in the meantime, and I already found a place to stay. We're staying at Kushina's house, which, according to the deed in the papers you just unsealed from the storage seal, now belongs to me." Damn, that's the one place I didn't have my ANBU check, thought Sarutobi, as he didn't know Rayleigh could even get access to the house. "I pray that you didn't tell the whole village or the council that Naruto was kidnapped, and caused mass panic among your ignorant masses. I really hope you learn from your previous mistakes." The Sandame frowned at that. "Just make something up when you talk with the council, if you haven't already done so. I intend to take care of Naruto until the end of my life, which unfortunately will be before he graduates from the Ninja Academy. After that, Naruto should be able to live on his own. I intend to start teaching him early. Please don't try to storm the Uzumaki estate, as I have placed several barriers and numerous fuinjutsu seals in the time I've had since I left your office. Your ANB wouldn't stand a chance. If the council has a problem with me raising Naruto, I don't really care." Silver Rayleigh, Shikuyaku. "I'm not sure if this is good or bad. Trying to get Naruto back is out of the question. I know how dangerous Uzumaki fuinjutsu can be, and I don't want to test out how inventive Rayleigh can get with his seals," thought the Sandame as he tried to calm his nerves. It appears that Rayleigh's old teammate Shaki was helping him. That would explain the beaten guards, the forged documents, and the break-in at the records room that he had just been informed about. Someone had used the ID and a henge of one of the injured guards to gain access to village records. Usually his pipe helped him, but today it just wasn't working. He rubbed the bridge of his nose trying to think about the current situation. The happenings of the entire day made him really wanted to bang his head on the desk. The documents in front of him were legal unless he could prove that they were forged. The Sandame knew they were forged, but he still had to follow the law and prove it. When the Sandame woke up from being unconscious, he had a pen in his hand, and it was possible that he was made to sign the document, in which case it really was his signature. He would also have to call Jiraiya back to confirm that his signature had been forged. Jiraiya wasn't coming back to the village for a long time, that much the Sandame knew. How exactly could he prove that the document was fake if he did actually sign it, while unconscious, and if he couldn't call Jiraiya back to prove that his student didn't sign this document? If he really did want to prove that the document was fake, then he would need a trial and have to call in all parties associated. This would no doubt attract unwanted attention, and the only option that the Sandame had would be to not do anything. The situation was not to his liking at all. He also didn't like the fact that Rayleigh was staying in the Yandame's residence, but there was little he could do as, according to the documents in front of him, the unlisted house now belonged to Rayleigh. The Sandame let out a huge sigh. Unfortunately, the best choice for right now is to leave Naruto in Rayleigh's care. I guess Rayleigh managed to get what he wanted in the end. Now I have to decide what to tell the Shinobi Council. Damn it, Minato, why did you have to die and leave me all these problems? Council room. 30 minutes later, the members of the Shinobi Council and the village elders took their seats along the table. The Sandame sat at the head of the circular table with everyone else sitting around him. There was no real order to the seating, at least the Sandame never cared about it. The last person to enter the room was Shimura Danzo, the Sandame's old rival. The man slowly made his way to the seat while using his cane, and the Sandame wanted to roll his eyes. He knew the man purposely came in last, and would sit last to make him look more important. He also knew that his rival may not have been nearly as injured as he made himself seem. The Sandame started the meeting. Now that everyone is here, he made a slight motion to Danzo and the man and didn't even acknowledge it, nor did he even seem to have his one good eye open. We can begin this meeting. Who would like to start? The moment after the Sandame finished, the voice of his former teammate and now village elder, Yuditane Koharu, spoke. I believe we would all like to know exactly why the ninja forces have made a mad search of the entire village, even the clan compounds. As you may or may not be aware, an unknown person entered the village through the front gate and attacked the two station guards. Their beaten bodies were placed underneath the desk at their station and found some time later. With the reconstruction, we were unable to have proper ANBU patrols, and it was some time before they were discovered. Both men are in the hospital and they have yet to wake, but the doctors are sure that they will make a full recovery and might be conscious by tomorrow. Since then, I have had the village on alert. The front gate was shut and most people were told to remain in their homes until the suspect was found," replied the Sandame. "What do we know about the suspect?" asked Aburame Shibi. To answer his question, Uchiha Fugaku looked to the Hokage, who nodded to him. Fugaku was the head of the military police of Konoha and had been put in charge of the investigation. The person in question has yet to be identified, though we have reports of a suspicious white-haired man in a white cloak that was sighted several times around the village, and we had one report of the secretary at the orphanage being rendered unconscious by a man matching that description. Tracking teams were unable to find a scent due to the only scent being found was cigarettes, and the popularity of that particular brand in Konoha. We also have a report of one of the beaten guards using his ID to access village records despite being unconscious at the time. We're still trying to determine what information he was accessing. Several people in the room straightened in their seats or were now paying more attention after the situation had been elaborated on. "Do we know anything about what this person might be after?" asked Nara Shikaku. Normally he wouldn't be that interested at these meetings and tried to fall asleep, but the current topic was far more important than what was normally discussed at these council meetings, and he was beginning to piece together something which wasn't very good. This time the Hokage answered, "No, I don't think we do. They didn't kill the guards, which is very odd considering that they may have been seen, and that is what an infiltrator or spy would do. They also haven't done anything other than access village records, which were the civilian records, and trying to get into the orphanage. They could be trying to set up a cover for a spy, but that is a rather sloppy way to go about it considering their obvious skill in infiltration and evading capture. Considering the amount of time it took until the gate guards were found and the lack of any recent appearance, as the sightings and 2 reports were made before the guards were found, it is entirely possible that the individual has already left the village and won't be found." Not a single member of the council took this information lightly. Their village had been infiltrated by an unknown person, and before they could even find an identity or gain any information about this individual, they had already escaped. It screamed incompetence on the part of the village shinobi. They weren't even sure what this person had done while inside the village. By the quick entry and escape while remaining undetected, it seemed like a professional with years of experience in infiltration, but the reports and living witnesses spoke of an amateur operation with no real thought or planning. "I know nobody wants to hear this, but is it possible that they were looking for information on Uzumaki Naruto?" put forth Shikaku after some thought into the situation. This question had a much more profound effect on the council. They all began to see that it was possible that someone was looking for information on the resident Jinchuriki. It would explain the trip to the records room and the trip to the orphanage. News was already spreading far and wide about the defeat of the Kyuubi, but not everyone might take the news at face value. "Hiruzen, have your ninja checked on the boy to make sure he is still in the orphanage?" asked Mitokado Hamura in a serious and tense voice. The Hokage realized for his part that this presented an opportunity for him which was created by the actions of Rayleigh and Shaki. "Yes, he is safe. Once I was informed by my ANBU about the gate guards and the secretary at the orphanage. I placed the boy in a secure location under the guard of 2 of my seasoned ANBU. The ANBU at the orphanage did not notice anyone in the vicinity, and responded to one of the matrons at the orphanage when the secretary was discovered. No trace was found of the suspect in question, and Naruto was promptly moved. I have also seized his records and will be keeping them and locked away to keep them from being seen by anyone else. I don't believe that his records were accessed by the infiltrator." The Hokage half lied. Several members of the council relaxed at this news. They didn't want another village to find out about the Kyuubi container, and hoped that the boy hadn't been discovered. The last thing that they wanted was for him to be kidnapped. "I can't believe that I just got away with that," thought the Sandame while keeping a straight face. "By seizing his records and keeping them out of sight, I won't have to worry about anyone finding out that Naruto has been adopted. I can even put the forged documents with the rest of his records and keep them in my vault behind my portrait in my office that only I have access to. I also have a reason to keep Naruto out of the orphanage for the time being, and no one may ask about his whereabouts after that. If everything goes well, they may not ask about his whereabouts until he is ready to join the academy." The Hokage was amazed at the turn of events. The previous decisions of the council when he revealed to them his burden were that Naruto would stay at the orphanage, and due to his civilian status, his records were all to be kept in the records room of the administration building next to the Hokage Tower. Altering or leaving out information from those records was against the law. The Hokage could not hold on to or seal away civilian records like he could with his ANBU division. Even the regular ninja force's records were not sealed but had restricted access to certain ninja personnel, the council, the elders, and the Hokage. All ANBU records were sealed safely in the Hokage Tower to keep their identities and information secret. With Naruto's records now seized, no one else could view them. They wouldn't be able to find out any information about Naruto. Civilian and ninja records were quite thorough and updated regularly. With Naruto's records seized, the Sandame could make additions or removals to the records without worrying about others objecting. It pretty much meant that the Hokage could directly control all information concerning him. The Hokage was no longer obligated to inform anyone about anything concerning Naruto. He could make decisions about the boy that overstepped his boundaries as Hokage and update the boy's records while never having to inform anyone that these decisions were made. I guess things worked out for the best, though I still have a splitting headache, and he looked at the clock and sighed. Another hour of paperwork before I can leave the office. Damn, I didn't know you were interested in photography? The Sandaime asked the white-haired man in front of him, while he sipped his tea. They were both sitting at the dining room table and the Sandaime was looking at the numerous pictures on a nearby stand. The Sandaime had been visiting at least 3 times a week to check up on Naruto. He was initially worried about them not letting him into the house, but Rayleigh had no problem with it, as long as the Sandaime didn't try and take Naruto. I'm not. Shaki is though. She insisted that he was the cutest thing ever and got pictures of him in a bunch of different outfits. Stated Rayleigh as he looked to the stand with nearly 15 framed pictures of a blonde-haired child. The Sandaime took his eyes away from the pictures and looked around the house. Rayleigh had moved all of his things into the house. The man seemed to have a collection of just about everything. He had swords, expensive pieces of art, books, scrolls, antiques, and a wild assortment of items collected from years of traveling the elemental nations and beyond. The Hokage then took in Rayleigh's appearance and had to hold back a smirk. The man's appearance was rather haggard and disheveled. He had some bags under his eyes from late nights, obviously as a result of taking care of Naruto. It looks like you've seen better days. The Sandaime quipped. You have no idea, Sarutobi. The first ninja war was easier than taking care of that brat. He eats 5 times the regular amount of formula that is recommended, and he shits a proportional amount. I can't seem to understand exactly how he fits it all in him. He just learned how to crawl and has been keeping both of us on our toes. If I let him outside, he could do laps around the house. He could probably crawl around the village before he gets tires, replied Rayleigh. The Sandaime couldn't help a smile breaking out on his face. He was finally getting revenge for the amount of problems that the pair had caused in the village months before and even a couple of times since then. By the way, where is Shaki and Naruto? Think she just managed to put him to sleep. Thank Kami. For the most part, one just tried to stay out of her way, said Rayleigh, ending in a slightly frightened tone. Why's that? The Sandaime asked seriously. Rayleigh answered in a slightly lowered voice. Since she has been taking care of Naruto, I told her she couldn't smoke anywhere near him. She pretty much quit cold turkey, and since then I have tried not to aggravate her in any way. The Sandaime paled slightly and shiver went down his old spine. It was one thing to have an angry Tsunade. She would attack with a single maximum-powered punch that was almost guaranteed to put someone in the hospital for a while. He knew that Shaki's method was different, however. She didn't hit nearly as hard but went about her punishments systematically like a technician. Shaki could beat someone for hours while keeping them conscious and making sure not to give them any fatal injuries. Then the victim would be in the hospital for an even longer period because of the sheer amount of damage. Tsunade's method, while initially incredibly painful and life-threatening, was far more humane. The Sandaime did not want to cross Shaki if she was irritable from lack of nicotine. Both men jumped in their seats as Shaki's voice came from the staircase as she made her way downstairs. So, what are you two talking about? I hope it isn't about me, said the woman's smooth voice while laced with a slight threat. We're just discussing the seal and about Naruto's upbringing, weren't we, Hiruzen-san? Said Rayleigh with a smile to the man sitting across from him. The Hokage for his part was instantly on guard because the man hardly called him by his first name unless he was about to swindle him. I keep telling Hiruzen-san that the seal is completely fine even though Naruto doesn't have his mother's or Mito-sensei's special chakra. Although the small amount of Kyuubi's chakra that is filtered into him will exponentially increase his reserves, and in order to make sure the boy can handle his large chakra reserves will require special training rather early, otherwise he may never be able to control his chakra to an effective degree. Hiruzen-san has so far been against the idea, Rayleigh said in slightly disappointed voice, but on the inside he was smiling at the victory he would win. Shaki narrowed her eyes slightly and looked to the Hokage. Everything Ray-san said was true. Naruto-chan's reserves will be incredibly high for his age, and he'll need proper training to control them. By the way, that tea isn't free. It's going to cost you 5,000 Ryo, and refills aren't including in that number. Shaki finished on a serious note. And that would be around $500 for a cup of tea. The Sandaime's sweat dropped as he could see he was being swindled by both people. Rayleigh was twisting his arm about Naruto, and Shaki was also ripping him off for the tea by a huge margin. He also didn't want to irritate Shaki. Well, as the Sandaime quickly thought of his defense and proceeded, since I have a second opinion, then I see no problem with starting the boys' training a little early. Both Rayleigh and Shaki nodded at this. I would also like to use training ground 43 like we were discussing, added Rayleigh, still with the same smile as before. They hadn't been discussing training grounds at all, but Rayleigh saw an opportunity to get what he wanted. The Sandaime narrowed his eyes at Rayleigh. He was being swindled again. The Sandaime didn't want Naruto anywhere near training ground 44, which was the forest of death. Even the training ground next to it would have been out of the question, but he was trapped. Fine, but I don't want you taking Naruto into the forest of death. Rayleigh thought about this. He was going to have Naruto train in the forest of death, but if he had Naruto go there by himself and not take the boy with him, then he could bypass the agreement. That sounds very fair, Horizon-san, agreed Rayleigh. This of course immediately set off alarms in the Hokage's head. Not only did he agree quickly, but he's still referring to me by my first name. What's he up to? Thought the Sandaime while looking straight at Rayleigh and trying to discern his real motives. Unfortunately, the man in question just kept up the same smile that he had on before. Sarutobi mentally sighed at that. He just wanted to make sure that Naruto would be safe. The Forest of Death was no place for anyone who wasn't a Chunin exam participant, or higher. He knew Rayleigh would keep a promise. Since Naruto was asleep and their conversation was over, the Hokage left to go back to his work. He would visit again soon to check up on Naruto. Before he got out of the door, Shaki said, "I'll put that tea on your tab, Sarutobi-san." The Hokage sighed at this. "I'm never accepting food or drink there ever again. I can't afford it," were his thoughts. After the Hokage was gone, Shaki turned to Rayleigh and said, "Did Sarutobi-san seem to be acting a little strange, Ray-san? Perhaps his job is getting to him," offered Rayleigh with a straight face. "Well, I'm going out for a smoke, Ray-san. Watch Naruto-chan while I'm gone." Despite what Rayleigh had said, Shaki hadn't quit smoking. She cut down on her smoking and would go outside, into the village, to smoke. She also made sure to use a jutsu that would prevent the cigarette smoke from clinging to her clothes for Naruto's sake. Poor gullible Sarutobi-san, Rayleigh thought. I managed to get what I wanted in the end. Unfortunately, I can't take Naruto into the Forest of Death, but that doesn't mean that I can't make him go in there or get Shaki to take him there, were the thoughts going through Rayleigh's mind as he sat with a small smile and finished his tea. In his free time, he had been searching through all of the techniques and jutsu that he knew and deciding what he could teach Naruto in the time that he had left. Whatever he couldn't teach, he was planning on leaving detailed scrolls for the boy, which he had begun writing. So many choices available. I didn't know making a decision on what to teach him would be so hard. Rayleigh spent several days making a list of everything that he knew and started reviewing it with Shaki. As for Shaki, she had started making her own list and had found someone to take care of her bar for a while in her absence. She may actually gain some business because few people ripped off their customers like she does, thought Rayleigh. Shaki's completed list was far shorter than the list Rayleigh had compiled and had mainly the more mental aspects of being a shinobi. She decided to teach Naruto about information gathering, stealth, traps, espionage, infiltration, basic medical care and techniques, some genjutsu, and really how to think logically and remain calm in a situation. Those are probably some of the best things that any young ninja should have a good grasp on, thought Rayleigh as he sighed yet again at the list in front of him. Rayleigh had to take many factors into account when he thought about training Naruto. The first and largest factor was that Naruto would have larger chakra reserves than people twice his age. Unfortunately, this meant that he would have to work extensively on chakra control. However, it did mean that Rayleigh could begin teaching shape and nature manipulation much earlier and maybe teach Naruto some powerful jutsu before he was even placed in the academy. That all depends on if he is able to use ninjutsu. His mother was never very good at ninjutsu, but his father was better. The second factor was that Naruto would have advanced healing and better stamina courtesy of the Kyuubi, which meant he could train harder, longer, and more dangerously than any other child. Of course, this all depended on how hard Rayleigh wanted to train him. Did he want to be sadistic and push the boy past his limits, or take things slower? I guess that depends more on the boy than me, though. Anyone could train someone in different ways, but it took a skilled sensei to determine which was to train his students. Some people had to be pushed hard because that was the best way they learned and grew stronger, while others required a slightly more delicate touch to training along with positive reinforcement, and all that crap, thought Rayleigh, and he sighed again. This just keeps getting more difficult. I wish I had a generic list like Shaki. The third factor was that Naruto may have some niche that he might specialize in. He could be a ninjutsu powerhouse or favor a specific weapon. The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't decide, and in the end he came up with one conclusion. I'll just teach him what I know he has to learn and then make scrolls explaining everything else. If I don't have time to teach him what's in the scrolls, then he'll have to learn on his own, was Rayleigh's final decision. Rayleigh was definitely going to teach Naruto taijutsu, sparring, physical training, survival training, stretching/agility, dodging, ninja tools, Yuzusho Fuinjutsu, several secret techniques of the Uzumaki clan, basic student jutsu, chakra control, and perhaps nature manipulation. This list was based on the abilities of his parents. Both parents were very adept at Fuinjutsu as well as all of the physical/practical aspects of being a shinobi. Neither parent was very adept at genjutsu, and Kushina was never adept at ninjutsu. Also, neither parent used any weapons besides regular ninja tools such as kunai, shuriken, ninja wire, and explosive tags. Well, Minato used those three-bladed kunai. That reminds me, may have to look at what his parents have. He should definitely learn his father's Rasengan and perhaps the Hiraishin no Jutsu if he left anything on it. Maybe Naruto would be able to finish his father's Rasengan. Kushina didn't have much besides the Shadow Clone Jutsu though, thought Rayleigh. The Shadow Clone Jutsu was already on the list of basic techniques to teach Naruto, which were all non-elemental techniques and ranged from E rank to D rank in difficulty. Of course, the shadow clone jutsu was far above those, but with the way his mother could use the jutsu, Naruto wouldn't have a problem with it. Everything else would be put into scrolls for the boy to use. Some of the extra information he already had written down in several standard textbooks and scrolls that he was given as a student in Uzushio. To make sure that everyone learned the basics and some advanced material, the leader of the village wrote several manuals all about ninja techniques that were written so that a novice could understand what was being taught. Uzushio didn't really have an academy. Most students were trained by their relatives, or many of the older ninja or injured ninja would volunteer to train small groups of students until they could pass a rigorous examination. Rayleigh still had all those old materials as he saved just about everything. Some were even meant for Chunin ninja. Rayleigh had already looked through copies of teachers' notes and syllabus from the Ninja Academy, which Shaki borrowed, to determine what Naruto will learn in the academy. Frankly, he wasn't that impressed with what the Leaf Ninja Academy was teaching their students. Apparently you only needed to know how to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu to pass the academy after 6 years of teaching. Naruto would definitely get more out of those books than he would get from an academy teacher. Have the standards for the Leaf Academy fallen over the years? He wondered. He'd have to ask Sarutobi later. Rayleigh was also trying to decide when to teach Naruto these techniques. That had always been a topic of discussion for a sensei or parents. Do you start when they are very young and teach them incrementally from there, or do you wait until they are a little older and start then? Rayleigh had heard of some clans beginning to teach how to unlock their chakra and how to start channeling chakra at age 2 or 3 and before a child could even read. Others waited until age 4 or 5, while children from civilian family had to wait until they entered the academy. There was also a similar debate with taijutsu and katas. Some clans started teaching katas and the very basic foundations of taijutsu as soon as a child could properly walk. Most clans didn't start teaching clan techniques or ninjutsu until at least age 8 to 10. Perhaps even later than that, though everything was skewed when a prodigy was considered. Most prodigies came from the shinobi clans and were all taught at a very young age, while advanced in ninja rank at unheard of speeds and at very young ages. Minato was actually not one of these children. As far as anyone knew, Namake's Minato was an orphan and not from any ninja clan. He was taught only at the academy, starting at age 6, like other civilian children. He was given the title prodigy as well, but still graduated along with Kushina at age 10. Minato also became one of the strongest ninja in history. Damn, this is a tough decision. I also have to take into account that I won't be around for very long. What would Kushina do? Rayleigh thought. Slowly a smile formed on his lips as he thought of exactly what Kushina would do. She'd start as early as possible and plow forward. I seem to even remember her ditching the academy by using a shadow clone to pretend she was there while really going out and training by herself. She even got all of the memories when the clone dispersed, so she didn't miss any lessons, thought Rayleigh, and he started laughing out loud. After he had stopped laughing, he thought about that memory of Kushina. She was able to train in 2 things at once, and was even at the academy all the while training elsewhere. This has promise. If Naruto used the shadow clone jutsu, he could do the same. We could both use shadow clones and I could teach him 3 things at once. He could also send one to the academy so I can still teach him one-on-one somewhere else, thought Rayleigh excitedly. Has any ever trained extensively like that before? I wonder if the influx of memories could have a negative effect on Naruto? Well, I'll ask Shaki first and follow her advice on the matter, concluded Rayleigh. Shaki was rather talented in the medical field. She wasn't Senju Tsunade or Chio from Suna, but she was still talented nonetheless. If Shaki felt it was too dangerous, then he wouldn't go through with the plan. So, I guess I will start training Naruto early and get in as much as possible before my time comes. Oh yeah, he's still 6 months old. I won't be able to start for at least another year and a half. Damn. I better get started writing those scrolls then. Hopefully I can remember all of the techniques that I have learned over the years. Konoha Park. A tall dark-haired woman was sitting on a bench and smoking a cigarette in Konoha Park. Shaki, under a henge of a different-looking woman with long hair and wearing a dress, was trying to relax after a long morning and night of taking care of Naruto. Even after 6 months of taking care of the boy, it didn't get any easier. The little bouncing blonde, and she did mean bouncing, had more energy than any other baby she would ever see again. Smoking had become a stress reliever decades ago. Of course, she never suffered from any of the harmful side effects from smoking because of the several seals she had placed on her body long ago. They were responsible for stopping any of the many harmful substances present in the cancerous sticks from getting in her lungs or her body for that matter. She had probably smoked 1,000,000 cigarettes over the years, but she never had any problems. Her teeth weren't stained yellow, she didn't have problems breathing, and she was very healthy despite a habit that would normally have killed her by now. Fuinjutsu truly is a wonderful thing, she thought as she let the breeze wash over her and listened to the calming sounds of the leaves rustling with her eyes closed. Despite all her information-gathering skills and contacts, she hadn't been able to figure out everything that had happened during the Kyuubi attack, and having gaps in her information really bugged her. She also found information that was odd. Someone had managed to control and rip the Kyuubi from Kushina, and only 2 men in the last century had ever been able to control the Kyuubi, and 2 women had been able to fully contain it. All of those people should be dead by now. The only one not accounted for was Uchiha Madara. From what she could find, no body was ever recovered after his battle with the Shodai. Of course, it was hard to wrap one's mind around the fact that a man like that could still be alive nearly 80 years after his death. Then again, she was over 100, so anything could be possible. Unfortunately, if it was possible, then it didn't bode well for Naruto. It was more likely that Madara had survived the fight with the Shodai and given his knowledge to an apprentice, and that person would have had to be from the Uchiha clan. She did some digging in the records and found that there really weren't that many members of the clan that were MIA or had disappeared. She also found that during the Kyuubi attack, not a single member of the Uchiha clan was wounded or killed. She browsed through some reports on the incident, and there wasn't even a mention of their clan members helping to defend the village or get villagers to safety. The location that the Kyuubi attacked at was even far away from their clan compound. This really didn't bode well for the village. It was all conjecture at this point, but it was possible that the person who used the Kyuubi to attack the village was from the Uchiha clan and the clan was aware of what that person was going to do. Shaki already looked through some files, and from what she could tell, there wasn't a single person from that clan who would have anywhere near the power and skill needed to control the Kyuubi. She knew all about the second version of the Sharingan, and some of its power from rumor among the elder members of the Uzumaki clan when she was younger. When I get back to the house, I'll tell Rei-san about what I found. We'll have to alter Naruto-chan's training to include resisting genjutsu and hypnotism, as well as all information about the Sharingan, its two forms, and how to counter its power. Shaki thought to herself. Shaki understood how powerful the bloodline could be with the right person wielding it, but she wasn't one of those idiots that believes that the dojutsu were all powerful and that it made the clans that wielded them powerful. She had heard plenty of stories about young Uchiha seeking fame and glory on the battlefield during the Clan Wars era. Nearly all of them met their death because they believed that their eyes would make them invincible. Some hadn't even unlocked their bloodline yet. It was one of the reasons that the Senju clan could stand against the Uchiha clan. The Senju didn't specialize in any one type of technique and were difficult to fight because of that. They also weren't anywhere near as arrogant as the Uchiha. From what she didn't know, the Senju had started training their members to resist genjutsu and hypnotism by somehow training their eyes to see through them. She wasn't completely sure how it worked, but she heard that the Shodai and Naidame were rather well versed in this obscure training. Rei-san and I may have to make some trips to the Hokage library and the Senju library. Perhaps Rei-san can twist Sarutobi-san's arm into letting us look through those texts and scrolls. Since the Senju clan had only one remaining member, the clan no longer had a compound. Also, the Senju didn't even have a large compound like the rest of the clans during the beginnings of the village. Unlike several of the other clans that were labeled as noble in the village, the Senju didn't marry into the clan, and after so many generations and several shinobi wars, the clan had branched out so much that only one true Senju actually remained. Others may exist, but the records have been lost or they moved out of the village. Shaki had long suspected that Minato had been a lost descendant of the Senju clan because it was so rare for a civilian-born child to achieve that level skill and prowess in the ninja world. Shaki didn't discriminate, but few civilian children who became ninja could achieve an S-rank status or become Kage. Nearly every Kage or S-ranked ninja in elemental nations had at least one direct relative that was also a ninja or had extensive ninja training. Children like Minato don't usually just pop up out of the blue, and if they do, after some checking, it was usually determined that they had ninja ancestry. Of course, Minato did have a lot of help in the form of his wife Kushina and perhaps that pervert Jiraiya, thought Shaki with a small smile. After a final deep inhale and exhale of her cigarette, she put it out and headed back to the house. I just need to take care of the person following me, thought Shaki as she noticed when she left the house that she was being followed. Her shadow clone had already taken care of the first one when he left, while the other stayed to continue watching her. The first had most likely left to report their preliminary findings to whoever they worked for. Her clone had already stopped by the Sandame's office and dropped that one off. The masked ninja wasn't one of the Hokage's ANBU but was dressed very similar. When he ran off, he was headed to the Hokage monument. Now the second one would be captured as well. As Shaki started walking off, she turned to where the second ninja was watching her and waved. The hiding ninja knew he had been found out and turned to leave, only to confront two of the white-cloaked ANBU members. The cloak signified that they were ANBU captains, and the unknown ninja didn't stand a chance. Shaki smiled as she saw several leaves fall from the tree that her stalker had been sitting in, and she continued to make her way back to the house. Two blurs left the tree heading towards the Hokage tower, with one blur appearing larger than the other, as if carrying something. Hokage tower, they both killed themselves? Asked the Sandame in a serious voice at the information he had just been given by Yamanaka Inoichi, the head ANBU torture and interrogation division. Unfortunately, yes, Hokage-sama. They both had a hidden capsule in one of their teeth, and the poison was very fast-acting. We couldn't even get an ANBU medic into the cell before they died. They didn't have any identifying marks on them or any way to tell their village affiliation. Their equipment was standard ninja surplus that you can buy anywhere. The only item that they did have were these specially made tantos. They're double-edged, but without a tip, stated Inoichi while he showed a photograph of the weapon. A tipless tanto isn't much to go on though, thought the Hokage. The blade was devoid of any markings, much like all ninja tools. Some weapons used by ninja were made inside the village, but others were made by larger manufacturers. They had all stopped putting any labels or logos on their weapons because an individual weapon could be traced back to a particular village due to the fact that each village had different makers and suppliers. It used to be possible to determine a ninja's affiliation by the equipment they used. Nowadays there were millions of kunai and shuriken in circulation, and they could be thrown and picked up by many different people. It was still possible if the weapon was unique, but there was also the possibility that the weapon was planted to make it look like some other group/village was responsible. All in all, it was nearly impossible to determine anything from what weapons someone was carrying, unless they were very unique, or one of a kind. Try and find who makes those weapons, and if you find out anything else, let me know," said the Hokage. "Hi, Hokage-sama," Inoichi said as he left the folder with the information with the Hokage and exited the office. From what Shaki said, one of them was heading to the Hokage monument. The ANBU checked throughout the monument but found nothing. From what it seems, either someone was trying to find and kidnap Naruto, or Danzo hasn't disbanded his root forces like I ordered him to years ago, thought the Hokage with a heavy sigh and rubbing his beard. Since there's no evidence of Danzo's involvement, I can't do anything. Although, this does present an opportunity, thought the Hokage as the wheels in his mind were turning. Naruto wasn't supposed to be kept at a secure facility for an extended period of time because of the original agreements of the council after his birth. He was supposed to stay in the orphanage until he was old enough to live on his own. The only reason he wasn't at the orphanage was because of the perceived threat that someone could be looking for information on the boy and an attempted kidnapping. Shaki had already confessed to all of the crimes, but he wasn't going to tell the council that. This new development presented an opportunity for Naruto to stay where he was and keep his location a secret from everyone. I'll have to be more careful from now on when I visit Naruto. Someone must have followed me or seen me when I visited the house and guessed that it was where Naruto was being held, thought the Hokage sadly. He would have to find a better way to visit in the future, and talk with Rayleigh and Shaki. All he had to do right now was write a report about what happened and alter it to suit his needs. He knew that eventually someone in the council, probably Danzo, would start questioning as to the location of Naruto, and before that was even brought up, I'll present this report to the council and it will take care of everything, thought the Hokage with a smile. He had eventually warmed up to the thought of Rayleigh and Shaki taking care of Naruto. It was far better than the neglect he would have received, and he would have someone to take care of him, and the Hokage did have Naruto's interests at heart. Despite his initial mistake of telling the village about his burden, he regretted that almost as much as his failure to stop Orochimaru. He also hoped Naruto would be able to cope with Rayleigh's eventual death. He had told the Sandaime that he didn't think he had more than 8 years before he would die, and the Sandaime was well aware of the ability of people from Uzushio to tell when their natural death was approaching, if they managed to live that long. He remembered the day that Mito-sama had come to tell him that a new container would have to be chosen because her death was approaching. Hopefully Naruto would be able to make many good memories until that time came, but that would be years away, and in the meantime, the Sandaime had a report to exaggerate and a council to deceive. For once he was actually enjoying his paperwork. Council meeting, sometime later that week. Now the last item that I would like to address was an infiltration of the village by 2 unknown shinobi, earlier this week. The Hokage said in a serious and calm voice despite the magnitude of the information that he just provided the council seated around him. Another infiltration? Wasn't security just increased across the village? Asked Hyuga Hayashi in an emotionless voice. What the hell? How bad is our village security? Stated Inuzuka-sama in an aggravated tone. Several had nodded in agreement to the questions, and the Sandaime continued at the look of expectancy from his audience. Yes, security was increased. That is why these two were captured before they could leave the village or make contact with anyone else, unlike the previous incidents several months ago. The 2 unknown shinobi were caught spying on a safe house in the village, and the ninja who have been posted there. After they were captured, they promptly killed themselves before we could interrogate them. We currently don't have any leads as to the affiliation of these 2 shinobi, the Sandaime said while mentally smiling at the stunt he was going to pull. While the tension was rising in the council, several people looked confused at the mention of a safe house. It was only a select few that realized what the Hokage might be talking about. As a result of this breach, I have relocated the safe house as well as its occupant, and changed ninja posted to guard it. This information will not be given out to anyone, stated the Hokage as he waited with anticipation for the inevitable question that would complete his newest plan. Who was the occupant of the safe house? Asked Udatane Koharu. Oh Koharu, I had a feeling you would be the one to ask. Now to drop the bomb, thought the Sandaime while keeping a straight face. Uzumaki Naruto, said the Hokage in a simple, direct statement, which was met with shock across the table. The only person who did make any movement was of course Danzo. Everyone else seemed to be thinking about terrible scenarios where the village Jinchuriki was kidnapped, and murmuring swept through the table. While the room was still in minor unrest, the Sandaime noticed that Danzo still hadn't moved at all. He still had his eye open by such a small margin that anyone would think he was asleep, or related to Koharu in some way as she did the same. The Sandaime wasn't sure exactly why, but he decided to act on impulse and what his sense of humor was telling him. Alright, settle down. And would someone please wake Danzo, he's fallen asleep again. said the Sandame while laughing on the inside and trying to keep his face neutral. To his statement, the single working eye of the man sitting directly across from him opened slowly, and stared directly at him, and gave him a dull glare. It took the Sandame quite a bit of effort to not smile or laugh because he found something very funny about the situation. "I've been awake the whole meeting, Sarutobi," Danzo said. "Good, then I won't have to repeat myself. In the meantime, Uzumaki Naruto will be confined to a secure location indefinitely. The location will not be given to anyone and this information will be labeled as an S-rank secret. Unless the subject is brought up by myself, it will not be discussed further by anyone here, at any time. I trust that you all agree with the decision," said the Hokage seriously while looking around at the members of the table. Of course the members at the table agreed with what the Sandame had said. It was rather drastic, but since only the members of the meeting and 2A and B were ever made aware of the existence of a safe house, this meant that the existence of the QB container had been discovered by someone outside the village, and they had managed to send ninja to determine his whereabouts in the village. From what the Sandame revealed, they may have been successful at finding his location, or were just able to find one of the ANBU posted to guard the safe house. Once the meeting was adjourned, the Sandame gave one last serious look at Danzo and knew that he would have to try and figure out where his root ANBU operation was, especially considering that he wouldn't disband his program until he was caught. The Sandame had never been able to find Danzo's headquarters or even a bunker. What he did find previously were reports of ninja acting outside of his forces. The Sandame had his own ninja capture many of them and explicitly told Danzo that his program was to disband or he would face charges of treason. Evidently the bandaged man had just gotten better at covering up his operation. At least Naruto will have some measure of comfort while he stays at the house. He will only have to leave when he goes to the academy or when he went out into the village. Preferably under supervision, thought the Sandame. He had wanted Naruto to try and make friends or at least interact with children his age as he got older. The current situation that he helped cause didn't help with that wish but was preferred over having the boy stay at the orphanage and eventually live on his own. Unfortunately, even Rayleigh and Shaki weren't sure what to do about integrating Naruto into the village, and neither was the Sandame. They weren't sure how easily he would be recognized or what other people's reaction to him would be. The children shouldn't know anything about Naruto because of the Sandame's law concerning Naruto and the Kyuubi. But as Shaki had stated after he told them about the law, it doesn't stop them from keeping their children away from Naruto. They just won't tell them that he is the container of the Kyuubi. The Sandame did unfortunately agree with her reasoning and he couldn't make unreasonable laws to make the population treat Naruto nicely. Hopefully, people would start to move on with their lives and by the time Naruto was in the academy. But that may be too much to ask for. The Sandame was not deaf to the whisperings of the villagers and he knew what the majority of the village thought of the boy. He didn't even need his crystal ball to see what they thought of the blonde child, and the majority of the jutsu that he uses are water-based. Shaki told the young blonde-haired boy sitting on her lap as she read from a book to him. Naruto was still learning how to read but Shaki was very patient with him when they practiced during the day while she read to him at night. "Shaki, it's great that you're reading to him every night, but does it have to be from a bingo book?" said Rayleigh in a tired voice. It had been a busy day, and he was about ready to be reacquainted with his bed but the other two occupants of the house were insistent on a bedtime story. "But Naruto-chan loves his stories and it helps to..." She paused and looked toward Naruto to finish her sentence. "Always be informed." The young blonde finished with a smile and Shaki nodded in agreement, while also smiling and ruffling his hair. Rayleigh's sweat dropped at this exchange and added, "Those aren't stories, Shaki, they're ninja and missing Nin profiles. At least read him something better before bedtime." "Fine, Ray-san, it's not like I was reading him the Kiri bingo book," she quipped, picking up Naruto off her lap and setting him on the couch. Shaki got up and went to Minato's study. Shaki wasn't interested in the children's books that Naruto had and wanted something more interesting. Browsing the shelves she came across a set of 5 novels. Shaki wasn't sure if they were something that Minato had or whether they belonged to Rayleigh, and he had picked them up on one of his travels. The title on 4 of the books were all The Treasure of One Piece and that had caught Shaki's eye, as she always liked the idea of treasure and Naruto may like a good adventure story. The other book was entitled Tales of the Gutsy Ninja which was also appropriate and might be interesting. The books were long enough that it would take weeks if not more time to read through them. That is, if they're any good. Shaki thought and made her way back to the living room. If the books belonged to Minato, then there was a good chance that they would be boring as the man's taste in literature was dull. Kushina didn't have many books to begin with, and the majority were romance novels. If they belonged to Rayleigh, then they were almost guaranteed to be interesting. "Ray-san, do these books belong to you?" came Shaki's voice as she entered the room. Rayleigh looked up from the paper that he was reading and examined them. "These 4 look familiar, and I think Jiraiya wrote this last one." Shaki looked at the book distastefully after the revelation and Rayleigh had to assure her that it didn't have anything inappropriate in it. "Oh ho ho, I remember these books now. I got them off a man decades ago when I fixed his ship for him. He didn't have any money but offered me these books instead. He claimed that they're very old and he found them in a treasure chest, if you can believe a story like that," Rayleigh said with a laugh as he thought of the memory. "I never got around to reading them though." How odd." They don't seem to have an author, nor a publication date, or any information besides the title and the story," stated Rayleigh in a perplexed voice as he examined each book. The only markings that he did find was on the inside cover. The books were labeled so you could tell which was first, second, third, and fourth, and then the story began in each. "They're in pretty good shape, but I seem to remember leaving them in a storage scroll for a long time, and they don't seem to be moldy." "Treasure of One Piece, huh? It does sound rather interesting." "Hopefully it's as good as it sounds. Here's the first one," said Rayleigh as he handed the first book in the series to Shaki and began to read. Shaki's intuition was correct. The tale was rather interesting, but she had to stop when she noticed that it was several hours past Naruto's bedtime, and he had fallen asleep in her lap. Who would have thought that a story about an idiotic captain who sails the world gathering his crew in search of a legendary treasure would be so enthralling to both child and adult? Shaki barely made a dent in the first book too. The following morning, after waking up before dawn and getting breakfast, Rayleigh took Naruto out into the yard to continue the beginnings of his training. Since Naruto was only 2 years old, the only training that he could receive was the most basic. Rayleigh had gone through numerous routines of stretching and loosening Naruto's body to prepare his body for later lessons. Naruto also learned several basic stances and katas from basic fighting styles. They also went through the process of learning all of the 12 basic ninja hand signs. Rayleigh hadn't taught Naruto what they meant yet as he was too young to understand, but he had Naruto go through them to get faster and more accurate at making them. Naruto's original attempts were sloppy, but that was expected for a child so young just starting out. Naruto would eventually learn exactly how ninja hand signs work and about each hand signs. The 12 signs were used to mold a person's chakra to perform a desired jutsu. The mechanism behind this molding of chakra was a direct result of an artificially connection/pathway formed when the hands are placed together and chakra flows from the chest, down the arms, and through the hands. Out of every other part of the body, the hands contain the most tenketsu points, which regulate chakra flow. By forming specific hand signs and connecting or leaving these tenketsu points open or closed, chakra will be molded differently along the artificial pathway created. More complex chakra molding requires more hand signs. After a great deal of practice, eventually a person can mold the chakra with fewer hand signs or without any hand signs as the repetitive use of a jutsu becomes second nature. Single-handed signs can also be used, but with a good deal of practice. A person would have to practice and mentally assign the single hand sign to a specific molding of their chakra. So, instead of not using any hand signs, a person could use a half sign to designate the molding of their chakra to a specific jutsu as a way of focusing. Jutsu names are also said aloud to focus on the formation of the technique. With practice, a person can mentally use the jutsu name instead of shouting it out and announcing to everyone what they are doing. Although most people just stick with the original name for a jutsu, some have changed the names of jutsu to make it easier for them as well as to slightly confuse an enemy, as the jutsu will have the same effect but they won't recognize the name. A select few have even assigned an incorrect name to a specific jutsu. For example, the person could be using a earth jutsu but say the well-known name of a fire jutsu or something along those lines. This can confuse the enemy, but without a great deal of practice, it can confuse the user as well. Rayleigh had just told Naruto the most basic 12 and included the hand sign for the Shadow Clone Jutsu, which was not one of the original 12 and was specially made for that jutsu. Naruto spent a good deal of time practicing the making of these hand signs in order to increase his speed and properly form them. An improperly formed hand sign could mean disaster for the user, as the chakra molding could harm or, on rare occasion, kill the user. Rayleigh was going to wait to inform Naruto of the use and importance of these jutsu until he was older and could understand better. Upon trying to unlock Naruto's chakra, they found that it was already unlocked, possibly the result of the sealing. Rayleigh had started Naruto with very basic chakra exercises. The first of these was to call upon his chakra to get a feel for it, so Naruto would know that it was there. This was accomplished by having Naruto pull on his chakra and bring it forth. After several tries, Naruto was able to bring forth his chakra, which manifested in a small spike and a feeling of warmth for him. After much practice, Naruto was able to call forth his chakra much faster than before and would continue the exercise until he could call on it immediately. The second exercise was to hover a small piece of paper over one's hands. Because of the concentration of tenketsu points in the hand, it was one of the easiest places on the body to call chakra to. Once the chakra was called, Naruto could start hovering the paper above his hand. At first all he managed to get was a slight move, then it jumped, and later he would have it hovering about 1/4 of an inch above his hand. This technique was the precursor to the third exercise, the leaf spinning exercise, which required more concentration. Even at age 2, Naruto already had chakra reserves of an academy student. It was Rayleigh's goal to keep Naruto practicing chakra techniques of increasing difficulty, in order to properly control his ever-growing reserves. If a person couldn't control their large chakra reserves, then what good was having such large reserves? After Naruto successfully completed the leaf spinning exercise in his hand, Rayleigh had Naruto stick a leaf on his forehead and had him hold the leaf there for as long as Naruto could. Once that was accomplished, Rayleigh had Naruto spin that leaf. After that, Rayleigh started to place one or more leaves on different areas of Naruto's body. At first, Naruto only had a single leaf, but as time went on, Rayleigh added more. Naruto was currently able to attach and spin 4 leaves to different parts of his body. Of course, these activities only took up Naruto's morning hours. Rayleigh wasn't harsh, but he wasn't easy on Naruto during those hours. As the years passed, Rayleigh planned to work Naruto even harder every year. Rayleigh also told Naruto that if he continued working hard, that he would learn more interesting techniques and perhaps even an E-rank academy jutsu in a few months. Naruto was jumping for joy at this, and his young mind had trouble imagining what else would be more interesting than using a nearly invisible force to hover and spin leaves on his body. To Naruto, that was incredible by itself. After a good lunch, Shaki would take over and start working with Naruto on his reading and writing. Rayleigh had encouraged Naruto to draw and even paint as fun activities which were actually geared towards him learning Fuinjutsu in the future. Naruto just thought it was fun to draw and paint. Many of his works were taped to the fridge. After dinner, things would settle down. Shaki would read more of the Treasure of One Piece, which everyone thoroughly enjoyed. This usually ended when Naruto started to get drowsy and both guardians would put him to bed. Hokage's office. While it may seem like the Sandaime was busy with his paperwork, his thoughts didn't concern the budget reports in front of him. They centered on a young blonde child, as his thoughts often had in the 2 years since the Kyuubi attack. Although the council was told that the safe house for Naruto was moved and the guards changed, he didn't change anything. The only thing that he did was make sure to not be seen entering the house and make sure that he wasn't followed. That was really the only measure he could take. The boy was growing up nicely, and according to Rayleigh and Shaki, he was progressing at a good pace through his learning and basic ninja training. The only thing that the Sandaime was worried about was the boy's future interaction with the village. The Sandaime wanted Naruto to interact with other children, but that extremely difficult. The Sandaime could guarantee that nearly every civilian parent in the village would not want Naruto anywhere near their children. For some odd reason, it seemed that nearly every head of the ninja clans had a son or daughter that was right around Naruto's age. It was an incredible coincidence that should not have happened without prior planning, but no one else on the council seemed to notice this besides the Sandaime. While the Sandaime knew that at least half of the clan heads did not see Naruto as the Kyuubi, he wasn't positive that they would want to having their children around Naruto, and he couldn't say the same for the other members of the respective clans. The members of any of the ninja clans may not want to be associated with Naruto in any way, shape, or form, despite the clan head not holding anything against the boy. The Sandaime couldn't ask for a clan head to ostracize themselves, or their children, from the rest of their clan, or the village, in order to give Naruto a friend. Eventually, Naruto would have to go out into the village. Whether for class at the ninja academy, or because he would become curious about what was outside of the walls of the yard. The Sandaime couldn't protect him from the hatred of the village, which had not decreased much in the last 2 years. He had spoken to both guardians about this dilemma, but none of them could come up with a definite solution to the problem. The only options that they could come up with had a definite chance of failure. The first option was to keep Naruto secluded from the village until he would go to the academy. This presented several problems because Naruto wouldn't have any idea how to interact with children his age, and he also wouldn't be prepared for the villagers, or perhaps even the teachers at the academy. The Sandaime wasn't naive in thinking that the academy teachers would treat Naruto like the other students. The second option was to take Naruto into the village every so often, supervised of course, while hiding his facial features, his whiskers. The Sandaime was well aware that the people of the village knew what Naruto looked like, blonde hair and whiskered cheeks, even if they had never seen him. This solution was better than others, but eventually people would find out who Naruto was. They couldn't ask the boy to constantly lie about his name while being in the village. Living a double life was one thing for a spy, it was another for a child. It was possible that with this method, Naruto would be able to have interactions with other children, at least until their parents found out who he was. Rayleigh had wanted this option as it offered Naruto some anonymity from the villagers and let him see them with his own eyes while they were unaware of who he was. The third option was to take Naruto occasionally into the village without hiding anything and let the village see him. This was essentially throwing him to the dogs, but with someone there with him. Neither guardian wanted this option, and the Sandaime was loath to admit that he didn't want it either, despite this being similar to his original plan of leaving Naruto at the orphanage to fend for himself. Therefore, the only viable options were the first and second. Shaki had wanted the first, but Rayleigh wanted the second, as did the Sandaime. They were more inclined to let Naruto see the village and interact with others. Eventually people would find out who he was and he would have to face their ostracism and hatred. If the villagers weren't going to let go of their feelings of the Kyuubi, then there was no point in trying to shelter Naruto. No matter what, Naruto would have to face them eventually if he wanted to go to the academy and be a shinobi of the village, which was the only career option open to him. Naruto was virtually a prisoner of the village. He couldn't leave and had to stay, but nearly everyone hated him in the village and wanted him to leave. Of course, none of these plans would be implemented right away. The Sandaime wanted to wait at least a year or two before Naruto would be able to leave the house and yard while under supervision. Both Shaki and Rayleigh were also planning on telling Naruto of his burden at some point in the near future. The Sandaime was completely opposed to this, but after 2 looks from the boy's guardians, he quickly realized that he really couldn't do anything about it. The law he made concerning Naruto only applied to citizens of Konoha, and both guardians were citizens of Fire Country but not Konoha. Thus, they could tell him against the Sandame's wishes. If it were up to the Sandame, he wouldn't tell Naruto until after he graduated from the academy. But Rayleigh and Shaki had different ideas and they wanted to tell Naruto much earlier. Rayleigh had also brought up another valid point about Naruto. Technically, the boy was the last of his clan and therefore the heir of the Uzumaki clan in addition to being the son of a Hokage. According to the laws concerning the ninja clans, which were set up during the founding of the Leaf Village, this gave Naruto many privileges in the village. Naruto also had several privileges, which Rayleigh was happy to point out, that were made when the two villages, Uzushio and Konoha, agreed to an alliance. Of course, only a select few in the village could even remember the Uzumaki clan to begin with, but the laws remained active regardless. According to the clan laws, Naruto was to be considered a shinobi, even though he was still a civilian, under the pretense of eventually restarting his clan in the village. This meant that if Naruto got himself into trouble, the punishment was decided and given by the Hokage and the clan heads of the village, and not the civilians. It also meant that Naruto could apply for the Clan Restoration Act in the future, and have multiple wives. Both the Hokage and Rayleigh had adopted rather blushed faces at that revelation as they sat at the Hokage's desk and read over the laws. It was something for Naruto to think about in the future. There were other trivial laws concerning the making of a clan house, making someone a vassal of his clan or adoption people into his clan, the duties required of the heir of the clan, appointing someone to oversee clan business for Naruto until he was old enough, and the possibility of being a clan head and attending the council meetings. According to the laws concerning the alliance between villages, Naruto, or any Uzumaki clan member for that matter, had dignitary/ambassador status while he was in Konoha. Apparently the opposite was also true. Any Senju clan member who was in Uzushio had dignitary/ambassador status. That news had surprised both men, as neither had ever heard of that law. That meant that Naruto, as well as Shaki and Rayleigh, were all supposed to be treated as ambassadors while in the village of Konoha. If any one of them committed a crime, then according to the law, they were to be extradited back to Uzushio for a punishment by the current leader of the Uzumaki clan or the leader of the village. The same was also true for the Senju clan while staying in Uzushio. This law was apparently made to prevent hostilities between the villages and preserve the alliance and friendship between the two related clans. It was also put in place as a show of good faith on both the Senju and Uzumaki clan heads. The law made no mention of whether or not either village still need to exist in order for the law to still be in effect. It also had to be followed considering that it was one of the founding laws of the village. Those laws couldn't be overturned or ignored by the clan heads, the village elders, or the Hokage. The laws upon which the Leaf Village was founded couldn't be easily changed either. The Fire Daimyo allowed for Konoha to be independent of Fire Country, and to make its own laws. The founding laws of the village were agreed upon by the clans of the village and the Fire Daimyo at that time. In order to change those laws, the consent of the current Fire Daimyo was needed along with the consent of the entire Ninja Council and Hokage. It was a long process, and a dignitary of the village, which Naruto was, couldn't be held by the village for a long period of time and had to be sent back to their corresponding village. Therefore, if Naruto, Shaki, or Rayleigh had to use that law, there wasn't anything that could be done. By the time the law was changed, if it had been changed, they would have long since been sent back to Uzushio. Rayleigh had a good and long laughing fit about the whole business. The man knew that there were some laws in place concerning Naruto, but he never dreamed that they would be considered dignitaries while staying in Konoha. The Sandame merely shook his head while trying to either frown or smile at the situation. Of course, the news was definitely good for Naruto as it gave more protection for Naruto if anything happened between him and the villagers. It also meant that if anyone harmed the boy, Naruto would be considered as a shinobi of the village as well as a dignitary. It didn't seem to matter that Uzushio no longer existed or that Naruto was living in the village. If, kami forbid, Naruto ever committed a serious crime or was possibly framed for a crime, then he would have to be extradited to a village that no longer existed and wouldn't receive any punishment for his actions. At some point they would have to tell the boy about this law, in addition to the village clan laws. I just hope Naruto never has to use those old village laws concerning the Uzumaki clan, thought the Sandame sadly as he never wanted to have the boy extradited from the village. Uzumaki estate. Oh, welcome back to our humble abode, Madam Ambassador, said Rayleigh in a very polite tone while giving a slight mock bow to Shaki as she entered the front gate of the yard. Shaki merely smiled back as the two had been having a running joke about their ambassador status for a while now. Naruto didn't really understand the joke but smiled because he was happy to see Shaki come back. She had left 2 days ago to check up on her bar and just now returned. Smiling was about the only thing that Naruto could do at the moment because he was laying with his back to the ground while breathing heavily. He and Rayleigh had been doing some very light sparring, meaning that Naruto had been charging in to attack and his sensei had been nimbly dodging for at least an hour. Rayleigh didn't even need to try and block or fight back because of the level that Naruto was currently at. Rayleigh was trying to teach Naruto one of the most basic ninja lessons, why it wasn't a good idea to charge in at an opponent that you knew nothing about, and that was enormously stronger than you, without any prior planning or thought to help you. All in all, it really annoyed Naruto that he couldn't seem to even get near his teacher, and he was slowly learning the lesson. So, what have you learned today, Naruto-kun? The bearded man asked the panting blonde child, who was still the ground in front of him. That you're a big meanie, said Naruto in between panting while glaring at his teacher. Rayleigh eyed the boy with a raised eyebrow, then laughed, and said, that really wasn't what I wanted you to learn. It was correct though, but not what I wanted you to learn from this lesson. You should have said something along the lines of, I can't possibly defeat you at the level that I'm currently at, Ray-sensei. In the future I will try and plan what I will do first, and not charge in like a drunken brawler. That was really what I was looking for, but you did do a good job today. You need to start thinking ahead for your fighting. It's better to make some type of plan first before engaging in a fight, and even if the plan works, you should try and have a backup plan or two ready anyway. I don't expect you to have an elaborate plan or plans at this point in your training, but you need to start thinking about how should I fight this opponent, and now I'm gonna charge in and punch this guy. If you start planning ahead now, then you'll be better prepared when you have techniques and jutsu to use in the future. Now go in and wash up for lunch, said Rayleigh, and Naruto picked himself up, dusted off the grass, and went inside. So, how's the bar? Rayleigh asked Shaki. Fine as always, Ray-san. I found someone else to work for me and she's not half bad, replied Shaki calmly. Since they had started taking care of Naruto, Shaki had already had several different people looking after her bar until she would be able to come back, which probably wouldn't be until Naruto was 4 or 5. I wonder who she blackmailed into running her place this time, thought Rayleigh. Shaki's rip-off bar. The hell? I ain't paying this much just for food and some sake. A man shouted to the woman tending the bar as he thrust the receipt back at her. The woman just glared back and pushed the receipt back at him. The man seemed to get more angry at the gesture but stopped when he thought of something. Well, I won't pay unless I get a little something extra, he added while looking down at the woman's impressive bust with a perverted leer. The woman's previous glare turned into an outright sneer, accompanied by a growl. Before the man knew what happened, he had been hit by an incredibly strong right hook that seemed to screech through the air. The fist struck with a resounding smack and he hurtled off his stool with his body acting like a ragdoll. He smacked into the floor once before going through the double doors of the establishment, and his body could be heard skidding to a stop outside in the grass. The blonde-haired woman stared at her work with a satisfied expression and yelled for her assistant, Shizen. Hi, Tsunade-sama, came the response of another woman who entered the main room of the bar through the door to the supply room while carrying a pig in her arms. Upon entering, Shizen realized what had happened and frowned at the buxom blonde. Tsunade-sama, did you have to beat up another one? It's not my fault, Shizen. He was a complete pig, no offense Tun-tun, and you know that we have to follow the rules that she set for us and run her place like she demanded, Tsunade stated in defense to her actions. Both woman and pig shivered slightly at the mentioning of the woman they were working/slaving for. After a brief moment, Tsunade said, You better go and get him. Watch out for his hands, he may try to grope you. Then we'll add the medical fee to his bill. And she added, if he's bleeding, heal him outside and then bring him in. Even after several years, the blonde still hadn't gotten over her hemophobia. Shizen nodded and went outside to get the latest customer. Honestly, she thought, I still can't understand why people still come here. It says rip off in the name of the bar. What do they expect? Thought the dark-haired woman as she made her way to the twitching body. She still couldn't believe that they had gotten mixed up in this business. Out of the blue, Tsunade had gotten a letter from one of the many people that she had borrowed money from. It stated that they could work off part of their debt if they tended to her bar while she was away. It seemed like a good idea, until they actually met the owner of the bar. In their first hour of being in the establishment, they already owed a significantly larger amount of money to the owner for the food and drink they consumed while talking about the job offer. Tsunade had heatedly protested and Shizen thought everything was going to be fine, but it wasn't. The owner of the bar was a demon in disguise. She didn't even need to use violence to subdue the two. The woman named Shaki seemed to know just about everything about the two, their current debts, who they owed money to, their darkest secrets, and she threatened to make their lives a living hell unless they worked at her bar while she was away. She would let Konoha know about the debts, leak out secrets about the two, and she even seemed to have a great deal of sway with the Fire Lord. The whole situation was terrible. Tsunade was ready to fight, but one look from Shaki had stayed her fists. That woman was so scary, thought Shizen, and she shivered. Since they had been working, Tsunade had managed to rack up far more debt from either consuming some of the sake or damaging some of the bar from sending the customers flying. Shaki had given them a quota each month for the amount of money they had to make from ripping off the customers that came in. Tsunade really didn't have a problem with it, but Shizen had a conscience. At this point, they would be here for another year before they managed to pay off all the debt they had incurred. Unless Tsunade-sama manages to make things worse again. Although she has gotten better with her aim, were the sad thoughts of the poor woman as she healed the newest customer. The only good part about their current arrangement was that Tsunade didn't have a chance to gamble. Shizen heard a bird chirping and actually flinched. Shaki had informed both of them of her bird summons and that they would always be watching them. Ever since then, Shizen had noticed many birds flying around the bar or just sitting on a nearby branch and watching her. She had nightmares about it, which centered around being chased down by birds and being attacked by birds. Slowly she was developing a fear of birds and the woman that summoned them. She also couldn't tell the difference between just regular birds and some of Shaki's summons. This is horrible. It's like a prison in this bar. Tsunade-sama can't even help us. We were only supposed to be here for 3 months, but we may never be able to leave. Kami-sama, please save us from that woman and her birds. Shizen thought sadly while crying. Tuntun gently nuzzled against her thigh as she finished healing the customer. He was afraid of the birds too. Rayleigh sighed as he rested on the couch in the family room. The plans that had been made to get Naruto integrated into the village and to try and get the boy to play with others hadn't worked. Well, that wasn't true. The boy had been fine when they walked around the village. Naruto's blue eyes had darted this way and that while trying to take in every sight there was to see in the village. This had only gone well for the first week. After that it seemed that they had been figured out. Naruto had worn a face mask, just like Kakashi wears, only a very dark green, to hide his whisker marks. Naruto had been excited to receive the mask and wore it without a problem. Of course it took a little adjustment to get used to the mask, but Naruto thought it was very cool. Everything had been fine until it was discovered that he was the QB container. After that, they couldn't walk in public without people whispering or dirty looks from the majority of the people they passed. A couple people had even yelled at Naruto and thrown things. It had been terrible for Rayleigh to watch as the boy tried to understand why he was being given dirty looks. The boy's keen ears seemed to also pick up some of what they were saying, and before Naruto had a chance to ask any questions, Rayleigh had maneuvered them on a path home. When no one was around, he then used the body flicker technique to take them home as fast as possible. The problem had been much the same when Naruto had tried to make friends in the park. Everything was fine for the first week, but after people, specifically parents, suddenly found out who he was, they started taking their children away from Naruto when he was in the park. Both Rayleigh and Naruto could hear the parents telling their children to stay away from him. Even the parents that were ninja and from the ninja clans had done the same. One adult had even come up to Rayleigh and wanted to know how he could even stand being near that monster. This individual was currently in intensive care at the hospital. That incident definitely hadn't gone over well with Sarutobi, thought Rayleigh about his dealing with the individual who had accosted him. After informing the Hokage of the attitude of the villagers and how easily they had figured out who Naruto was, the Sandaime had actually had a couple of his ninja do some investigating, but none of his ninjas seemed to be able to find where this information had come from. The information had spread so rapidly and been passed to so many people in a single day, that it was impossible to tell who had started it. Despite the Sandaime's law about not talking about Naruto, that was all that people seemed to be doing. Wild rumors had even started spreading that Naruto was disfigured in some way underneath his mask or had the face of a fox. Everyone in the trio of elderly guardians had started to regret giving the boy the mask, but Naruto refused to part with it as he liked wearing it. Naruto had been asking several questions about what had happened and had even cried over the loss of the children that he had been playing with mere days before. That was a terrible day, thought Rayleigh. He had to come up with something to tell Naruto, as he really couldn't tell the boy the whole truth at the moment, and wanted to wait a little longer. On the other hand, he didn't want to just lie to Naruto, as Rayleigh felt that the boy did have the right to know what he was containing. Rayleigh and Shaki had spent much of that day telling Naruto about the QB and using extremely simple language and examples to try and make sure that Naruto understood that he was really no different than any other child, but that the people of the village were very misguided. They also told him about his mother but not about his father being the Yondaime Hokage. They told Naruto who he was and what he was like but not his title. For the most part, they thought that Naruto had some kind of understanding of what they were telling him. He was just over 3 years old after all and couldn't be expected to understand something so complex as sealing a biju, or what Fuinjutsu and biju were. In the end, after much questioning, a little more crying, and a lot of hugs from those that cared for him, Naruto had a basic knowledge of why he was treated like he was. Both guardians also agreed to tell Naruto more in depth about everything when he was a little older and could understand. They also let Naruto know that no matter what the villagers thought of him, that they would never think badly of him, and that there were a select few in the village who believed that he was a hero. They had even used several examples from the One Piece novels that they had been reading to help him understand. Even though the pirates in the book, specifically the Straw Hat crew, were not liked by the Marines or civilians because they were pirates, they were still good people and you just had to get to know them to find out. That reference had probably helped Naruto the most, as he loved those books and the characters in them. He could make the connection a lot better that even though people in the village disliked him, there was nothing wrong with him. They had already finished reading the series and read the Gutsy Ninja. While Naruto did like the ninja book, because his name was the main character, he still really liked the One Piece novels and he was determined to be able to start reading them by himself. At his current reading level though, that was going to take a little time. His studies were coming along nicely and they, along with his ninja training, were the major highlights in Naruto's life. Now that he wouldn't be going outside much, until he was perhaps a little older and could handle the villagers, Naruto had more time for training. Naruto had already decided that he wanted to be as strong as the characters in One Piece, and when asked, Naruto had actually stated that he enjoyed the character of Roronoa's Zoro the most. The parts of the books where Zoro was fighting were some of the most exciting. For asked why, Naruto said that it would be really cool to wield 3 swords like Zoro did. His favorite fight was actually when Zoro was fighting Samurai Ryuma. Right after that, Rayleigh had started making plans to begin teaching Naruto Kenjutsu. Rayleigh's deceased teammate had been quite the swordsman, and Rayleigh knew a fair amount about Kenjutsu. He wasn't sure how well he could help Naruto learn a three-sword style, but he would try to teach the boy basic Kenjutsu for now. Shaki hadn't been around nearly as much as the previous year because she did have a business to run, and was only present now on Friday through Sunday while Rayleigh was always around. Apparently the people she had running her bar had tried to run off, and she had to keep a closer eye on them from now on. She also had several businesses to run on the side of her legitimate business, and couldn't spend as much time as she wanted with Naruto. Before he fell completely asleep, Rayleigh managed to make it upstairs to the room that he was staying in and looked forward to training Naruto in the morning. Next morning, Uzumaki Estate. But I want to learn another jutsu, said Naruto while pouting. Rayleigh just rolled his eyes at display. Naruto had already learned most of the basic jutsu which were for both E and D rank. He learned the rope escape, the cloak of invisibility, and the basic clone technique. I really shouldn't have taught him the clone technique. He tries to create as many as possible and I end up in a yard filled with Naruto-kuns. I still don't know how he managed to tie himself up tighter in the ropes while trying to escape it with the rope escape technique. I had to use a kunai to get him out of it. At least he finally managed to get that jutsu down. It wouldn't do him any good to try and escape from an enemy and end up tying himself up tighter than they originally did, mused Rayleigh with a frown that turned into a smile at the last thought. And Naruto doesn't have much of a problem with the basic clone technique because he has such a little amount of chakra that his control is much better than when he is a genin in canon. He has also been learning chakra control exercises. However, as time goes on, the technique will become harder for him to perform because his chakra reserves increase at such a larger than average rate. Rayleigh had already started teaching Naruto to throw shuriken and kunai, though his accuracy leaves something to be desired. Rayleigh thought as he looked over to one of the practicing posts that he had set up in the yard and noticed that it was unmarked. However, the ground and walls behind, to the sides and front of it were marked with slashes and divots from thrown weapons that completely missed the mark. They're pretty wide logs too, and there are 3 of them positioned together less than a meter apart. He should have at least been able to hit one of them, even if the weapon didn't hit point first, thought Rayleigh while shaking his head. The only techniques left that Rayleigh was willing to teach at this point were the henge and the substitution jutsu. Rayleigh had held off on these because after teaching Naruto the other jutsu, he had begun to question whether Naruto was mature enough to learn the substitution jutsu and the henge. The last thing he needed was Naruto trying to substitute with anything he could find or trying to see how many substitutions he could do in a row. The henge was a similar situation as leaving it up would use up chakra. The jutsu was only meant for short-term usage. The blonde boy's chakra reserves were nearly low genin level, but Naruto's mind was still that of a child. Naruto had already tried to see how many bunshin he could make in one go, and Rayleigh had to draw the line somewhere if Naruto was going to start playing with the jutsu he taught him. It was a problem because Rayleigh didn't have much time left to teach Naruto. If the boy wasn't mentally ready for ninjutsu yet, then there was no point in teaching him. He didn't want to waste any time, but he wasn't going to push Naruto's training and development like some of the ninja clans did to their children. I'll wait for a couple of months maybe and work on other things in the meantime. Now I just need something that will keep him interested and busy. Maybe a chakra control exercise or something. Naruto's chakra control was very good, but he had to work on it each day to keep it up. Rayleigh had taught Naruto the basics of how to suppress and bring forth his chakra, in addition to pulsing it. The problem was that Naruto may not be ready yet to start tree climbing, and Rayleigh needed a technique that would be interesting to Naruto while still being useful and demanding enough to keep the boy's mind off of more powerful jutsu for a little while. Of course, while Rayleigh was thinking, Naruto assumed he was deciding which jutsu to give him. That might work. Rayleigh mused out loud, and Naruto was instantly wondering what jutsu his sensei may have thought of to teach him. It must be an awesome jutsu. I bet it on a much higher level than what I have now, were the thoughts going through Naruto's head, and he couldn't wait to see the jutsu and try it out. This should be enough to keep him busy and keep his mind off of jutsu in the meantime. Were the vastly different thoughts going through Rayleigh's mind. Rayleigh had remembered a rather old and obscure chakra technique that wasn't really taught anymore. No one could definitively say that it was very useful, though some claimed it could not only increase chakra control and reserves, but had many other benefits. Most chakra techniques had an endpoint. You mastered the tree walking exercise when you successfully could climb the tree without fault or getting tired. This was the same with the water walking exercise. At that point, most people just stopped practicing with those techniques as regular ninja duties and other training would keep their chakra control at a stable level. The technique Rayleigh was thinking of was similar to meditation in that it had no point at which you could say, "I'm finished." The few ninja that did meditate, and it was a very select few, never reached a point where they completed the exercise. Even monks never reached an endpoint. Rayleigh had already tried teaching Naruto how to meditate, as it was a good technique for a ninja that had several benefits. Unfortunately, the blonde was so hyper that it was difficult to get him to settle down in one spot. Hopefully he will be able to have better success with this technique. I can only hope that Naruto calms down enough in the future that he can properly meditate, thought Rayleigh. Those were the main reasons why the technique wasn't normally taught, as it didn't have a completion point, and no one could prove it was useful or important to teach. If it was taught, then the student would get bored with it as they could not see any immediate benefit. However, Rayleigh's sensei had believed that it was useful and beneficial to learn. And who am I to disagree with Mito sensei? I won't be teaching you any more jutsu just yet, stated Rayleigh while smiling, and continued before Naruto could start protesting. However, I do have a moderately difficult technique, with multiple parts, some of which are much more advanced than you are ready for, announced Rayleigh, and he could tell that he definitely had Naruto's attention at that point. The technique is rather simple to explain and difficult to learn, but my sensei believed that it could have great benefits for a ninja if you kept using the exercise to get better and better with it. Now the technique is. Rayleigh gave a brief pause to be dramatic and continued, spinning your chakra. Naruto blinked and stared at the man. Huh, that's it? Spinning my chakra is this great technique you want to teach me? Asked an exasperated Naruto, and Rayleigh nodded while smiling broadly. Naruto looked dubiously at his sensei and asked, So you learned this technique and it helped you? Yeah? Responded Rayleigh with fake enthusiasm while thinking, I only remember spending about a day trying to learn the technique before I gave up on it, but Mito sensei was convinced that it was useful. Though I still don't see how. Of course there's more to the technique than you might think. The first step is to try and spin your chakra inside of your body. After you accomplish that, then you try to spin it faster while tightening the spiral so that it gets smaller. The goal is really to get it spinning as fast as possible while having as tight a spiral as possible. That part is a rather difficult exercise, but it gets even harder when you try and change the direction that your chakra is spinning. You see, normally a person's chakra naturally spins in one direction, while it is far more difficult to spin in the opposite. Well, that's the exercise that I want you to try. I've been told that this technique can be quite useful, although no one has ever proven that it can do anything to help a ninja. Supposedly it can increase your chakra reserves, increase your chakra control, help access your chakra easier, possibly even help you mold your chakra for jutsu, and I seem to remember hearing something about making it harder for genjutsu to take hold. Of course, that's all just speculation. I also seem to remember an advanced Fuinjutsu of Uzushio that required the user to be able to spin their chakra in both directions to cancel out ninjutsu, but I'll have to check on that. Finished Rayleigh while idly scratching his beard. Wow! Was Naruto's wide-eyed response. He had originally thought that this was going to be something stupid, but now it was turning out to be an awesome technique. Especially if it can do everything that Ray-sensei said it could, thought Naruto. Despite Rayleigh using words like supposedly, and possibly in addition to stating that it had never been proven to do anything, Naruto had acquired from the explanation that the jutsu was capable of doing all those things. I'm totally gonna master that jutsu and work on it as much as I can if it can do all that. I'm gonna master this technique. You just watch. Naruto yelled and instantly put his hands together in the ram seal, which is the most basic seal to use when gathering chakra, and started to try the technique. His face was scrunched up from concentration, and Rayleigh decided to step in and stop the blonde after a couple of minutes. Before you get started on the technique, is there anything you want to ask me? Questioned Rayleigh. Naruto stopped his focusing and looked up at his sensei quizzically. How do I spin my chakra? Asked Naruto with a slight blush on his face as he wasn't wearing a mask during his training. Rayleigh laughed at the boy's expense and asked, There's another question you should be asking me too. Think back to what I said about the technique, and it should come to you. Naruto spent a moment in contemplation, and the answer eventually came. What direction should I try and spin my chakra? Rayleigh smiled at the boy's correct question and began explaining the answers. To start with your second question, the easiest way to tell which direction a person's chakra naturally spins is to look at their hair. At Naruto's confused look, Rayleigh's smile widened and he sat down in front of the boy. On the top of a person's head, their hair parts, and you can see that the part has a direction of either clockwise or counterclockwise. Rayleigh said as he bowed his head so that Naruto could see what he was talking about. Your hair parts clockwise, just like mine, so you want to try and spin in a clockwise direction and then eventually switch and try counterclockwise. As for your first question, it is really a matter of finding something to focus on. When you were doing the leaf spinning exercise, you had an object to focus on and spun that object with your chakra. What you will be doing on this exercise is different, as the chakra won't be exiting your body, but you will need something to focus on. I suggest closing your eyes, putting your hands in the ram seal, but try not to focus too much as you were doing before. Start off by closing your eyes and feeling your chakra, and both closed their eyes while Rayleigh continued. After you have done that, the best way may be to focus on a single object in your mind. I am going to imagine my chakra as a body of water, but you can imagine whatever you want. Naruto imagined the same thing as Rayleigh and listened to his sensei's words as the man continued. Now, you want to access your chakra and picture it as the object you have imagined and try to make it spin. While Naruto was attempting the exercise, Rayleigh went and got his lawn chair, brought it over, and sat down. He would give the boy an hour before they switched to working on the basics of kenjutsu, which Naruto had requested to learn. While he read the newspaper, Rayleigh did check on Naruto's progress, offering tips and telling the boy about his progress. It took about a half an hour for Naruto to finally get his chakra to start slowly spinning continuously. Naruto had many times where his chakra would start spinning and then he would lose focus. He also stopped trying to move his head in circles. Apparently he thought that would speed up the process of learning the technique, and quickly found that it only made him dizzy. He seems pretty determined, and I think this is the longest I have ever gotten him to sit still in one place. Not counting when Shaki or I read those pirate books to him. If he calms down enough while he is focusing, it might even be counted as meditating. Perhaps with time he won't need to focus so much, and he can get some of the benefits of meditation while still working with his chakra. Rayleigh smiled at the thought that the technique might actually turn out to be useful in different ways. Maybe I shouldn't have stopped with the exercise. I may have gotten some benefit from it, even if it wasn't what Mito-sensei claimed it was. I'm definitely going to have Naruto keep practicing with technique whenever he can. Now I can start focusing more on his physical and mental training rather than his chakra control and jutsu. Of course, that assumes that Naruto doesn't lose interest in this technique, and the exercise does what it's supposed to do. Rayleigh mused. Little did Rayleigh know that his sensei was actually correct, and the simple chakra technique had many benefits that would eventually emerge for Naruto as the boy was determined to master the technique. Uzumaki Estate. Several hours later, both child and sensei were currently standing in the kitchen, and Naruto was looking very confused. They had come in from Kenjutsu practice, and Rayleigh had walked him into the kitchen for his next lesson. To Naruto, it didn't make much sense why they would be in the kitchen for his next lesson. The only thing that Rayleigh had said was that they were starting something new today. At the time, Naruto was excited, but now he was just confused. I bet you want to know what we are doing in the kitchen, right? Naruto nodded to his sensei's question. Well, the purpose of this exercise is to help you develop a better memory and observation skills, which are very important for a ninja. Rayleigh added the last sentence to keep Naruto from questioning him. Now, I am going to open the door to the pantry. Your job is to recognize and memorize exactly what is in the pantry, and on which shelf, before I close the door. After the door is shut, you will tell me exactly what you were able to memorize. You will definitely have trouble at first, but eventually you should be able to tell me nearly every item in the pantry, and what shelf it is on. Stated Rayleigh, and looked to see that the blonde boy had understood his explanation. Are you ready? Asked Rayleigh, and Naruto nodded with enthusiasm. Rayleigh speedily opened the door to pantry, and the second it was fully open, he closed the door just as fast as he opened it. Naruto, for his part, just stood there with his mouth slightly open and immediately thought that his sensei was trying to play a prank on him. So, tell me what you saw in the pantry, Rayleigh stated with a smile. What was that? You opened it for not even a second. How am I supposed to tell what was in there? Rayleigh shook his head slightly, which Naruto started to feel guilty about. This is a very important skill for a ninja, to be able to observe and recognize the situation at hand with a moment's notice, and also to memorize what they see. I didn't expect you to be able to tell me anything right now, but after we go through some memorization techniques and increase your observational skills, you should be able to tell me everything in that pantry at just a glance. I will also be locking the pantry to make sure you can't get in it beforehand and memorize what's there. After you complete this task, I will increase the difficulty. The next thing I want you to do is to look around this level of the house and tell me what has changed since this morning, said Rayleigh to the young blonde. Naruto looked around the house. The kitchen isn't really separated from the family room because of an open floor plan, so Naruto can see around most of the first floor of the house, except for the study, and tried to notice anything that was out of place, but he didn't find anything. Rayleigh merely nodded and understood that Naruto didn't find anything. While they were both outside, Rayleigh's shadow clone had gone to the grocery store and after coming back had moved several items in the first floor of the house. Rayleigh hadn't expected Naruto to notice, but now the boy would try to make an effort to notice. I didn't expect you to notice anything at this point, so you don't need to feel so sad about it. Observation is another important skill for a shinobi. A simple discrepancy in the surroundings can mean the difference between being trapped in a genjutsu, setting off a trap, or perhaps an ambush, and could be the difference between life and death. Of course you will get better at this, especially since we will be working on both exercises every day to improve your skills, stated Rayleigh, trying to cheer up Naruto. His words did cheer up Naruto to some degree, but he still felt guilty that he failed to accomplish anything in the exercises. Naruto was going to try as hard as he could to work on his ninja skills and the techniques that his sensei was teaching him. He definitely wanted to get as strong as the people he had read about in the pirate stories, and he had a sensei who was trying to teach him as much as possible. I won't disappoint you, sensei. I'll learn everything that you have to teach me and more. I won't give up ever. I promise, thought Naruto to himself with renewed determination as sensei and student ate lunch together. That had actually been one of the things that Rayleigh had taught Naruto when they started his training. His sensei had several sayings that Naruto had taken to heart, though one still confused him. And I didn't get the two first sayings from anywhere. I actually made them up on the spot when I wrote the chapter, so I am claiming ownership of them. Hopefully they aren't too similar to anything else that has been written. The only people in the world that can be considered as failures are the ones that don't try. If a person gets back up and works hard, then they can never be considered a failure. No matter how many times they try and fail, a person can be called weak by others, but in reality it doesn't mean anything. Only if a person believes themselves to be weak, then that is what they will be. If they believe in themselves and work hard, then they will get stronger. Even if it is just a little bit at a time. A woman's intuition can be a scary thing. Naruto still didn't understand the last one. He also knew that Rayleigh had been talking specifically about Shaki when he said it. What does intuition even mean? Does he think that Shaki Bakun is scary? Thought Naruto idly while eating his meal. He'd have to ask Rayleigh later, and I believe that the honorific Naruto gives to Shaki is for aunt and not grandmother. Hopefully I did it right. He's pretty much calling her Auntie Shaki. Uzumaki Estate, 1 month later, during the weekend, when Shaki is there, and those are the proper seals for the Henj no Jutsu. Finished Rayleigh, as he went over the basics of the jutsu with Naruto. Naruto had made great progress in just a single month, and Rayleigh felt that he should reward the boy with the transformation jutsu. The blonde was able to spot at least 1 or 2 objects that had been moved by Rayleigh in the first floor of the house and tell Rayleigh several items in the pantry, though he was only able to look at a single shelf. Naruto had also made progress with the chakra technique and was able to spin his chakra pretty fast, and his spiral was slowly getting tighter. Naruto was also trying to spin his chakra in the opposite direction, but with limited success. Rayleigh was surprised and proud that Naruto had not only stuck with the chakra spinning technique but was constantly trying to get better with it. Naruto's focus had improved enough during his practice with the technique that he was actually meditating while spinning his chakra and would practice for at least an hour or more each day. Rayleigh had even discovered Naruto using the technique when he took a break in between his lessons. It was this hard work and progress that had shown Rayleigh that Naruto was ready for the remaining academy-level jutsu. Naruto was already going through the hand seals of his new jutsu and said, Henj no Jutsu. The results were as Rayleigh had expected for a first try, only much funnier. The silver-haired man couldn't hold in his laughter. Zahahaha Shaki, you have to see this. No sooner had said woman come out of the house than she too started laughing along with Rayleigh. Naruto had attempted to turn into the Sandaime. The venerable Hokage regularly visited and did give Naruto some advice while checking in on him. Though Naruto had gotten the height correct and the clothing, including the hat, the face was completely deformed. This Hiruzen had buggy eyes and a very long, pointed nose and for some reason a perverted smile with very fat lips. The beard was overgrown and the liver spots were much larger and oddly shaped. Naruto had even given him a pipe. Naruto pouted at the laughing of his guardians, and of course that meant that Hiruzen pouted as well, which made them laugh more. Eventually the laughing started to die down, and Rayleigh's had stopped completely when he smelled something. He smelled pipe smoke. Sarutobi was here yesterday, but that smell couldn't be lingering around still, Rayleigh thought, and followed the smell to the transformed Hiruzen. Shaki hadn't noticed yet and followed Rayleigh to inspect the blonde's henge of the Hokage. It wasn't until she saw Rayleigh's serious face and noticed that he was carefully and meticulously looking the transformed blonde over that she thought something was wrong. The smell was stronger now that Rayleigh was closer to Naruto, and the only thing that he could think of was, how did Naruto produce the pipe smoke? Now that I am closer, this person even smells like Sarutobi. Pipe smoke, paper, and ink. While Rayleigh was deep in thought about the scent, Shaki noticed something that he hadn't. The robes of this Hokage were actually moving slightly in the breeze that came through the yard. A henge shouldn't be able to move like that unlike the user is focusing and making it move, she thought. The henge was meant to place a very thin layer of chakra over the user that could hide the user as an object or a person. The layer either mimicked the contours of the person's body, in which case it required less focus and the user could move, or it was projected a very short distance away from the user which required more focus to keep up and made it impossible to move while the technique was still up. To have a part of the henge be able to move in the breeze would require a great deal of concentration and training because the henge shouldn't be affected by a breeze and the user would have to will the jutsu it to move in tandem with the breeze. No beginner should have that kind of skill or focus. Most experienced shinobi never develop that kind of attention to detail or skill with the henge. Shaki was broken from her thoughts when she saw what Rayleigh was doing. Ray-san, are you smelling him? Rayleigh was broken from his sniffing of the false Hokage and said, Hyo, yes actually. I can't believe it Shaki, but he actually smells like Sarutobi-san. Pipe smoke and all. Have you ever heard of anyone producing a scent with a henge? It's rather strange. Shaki's eyes widened at that information. The henge wasn't supposed to mimic scent, which was why it could be fooled by ninja trained in tracking as well as Niken, ninja dogs. Shaki had never heard of a henge producing scent before, as the henge couldn't even hide the scent of the user. That brings up an interesting question, she thought and voiced her thoughts. If he smells like Hiruzen-san, can you still smell Naruto-chan? Rayleigh blinked and went back to smelling the now slightly freaked out henge child. Naruto didn't know what was going on. First his guardians had laughed at his attempts at the henge and now they were being all serious. Did I mess up the technique? What's going on? Now they're smelling me, the blonde thought. After Rayleigh had determined that he couldn't smell Naruto's original scent over that of the Hokage, Naruto decided to voice his opinion. I don't understand what's going on. However, instead of the voice of a child, his voice sounded just like the old Hokage. Both guardians stared at him and Shaki finally noticed the deformed face of the Sandaime was nearly in tears. Don't worry Naruto-chan, we were just taken aback your henge. While you need work on fixing the face to better match that of the Hokage, your jutsu is very advanced in other areas and incredible for a first try. Now, go into the bathroom and continue practicing the jutsu while looking in the mirror. You'll probably notice why we were laughing. Ray-san and I just need to talk about some things. The hinged boy's fears were assuaged and he went into the house to seek out the mirror and keep practicing. Both adults noticed that the boy even seemed to match the Hokage's mannerisms and the way that he walked. Once Naruto had entered the house, they were finally able to get out of their stupor and talk to one another. Did you hear that? He sounded just like Sarutobi, and he hasn't even had any lessons to change his voice yet? Amazing, Rayleigh said while chuckling. When he was walking into the house, did you notice his robes and the way they naturally moved around him? Asked Shaki, and Rayleigh nodded at that. Both were blown away at the henge that Naruto had used. Of course the face still needed work. Their musings were broken by the loud laughter of the Hokage coming out of the house. Apparently Naruto had looked at himself in the mirror. Both guardians just smiled at that. What exactly did Naruto-chan do? Did he mess up the seals or something? I don't quite know. He executed the jutsu perfectly, and I don't understand what happened myself. When he's done having fun and trying to fix the face, we better get him out here and try to figure out what he did do, answered Rayleigh. Hours later, Naruto is in bed. Shaki, Rayleigh, and Hiruzen were sitting in the living room and discussing their discoveries during the day concerning Naruto's henge. None of them could believe just what they had found out when they had Naruto experiment with it. Can you started Rayleigh, and he was cut off by Shaki. No, Ray-san, we still can't believe what Naruto-chan's henge is capable of doing. The Sandaime just smiled and shook his head. The old Hokage was also in disbelief at just what Naruto had been able to do. They were all still thinking about it. In all his years, he had only ever encountered one individual that could use a henge like Naruto could, and that was his summons, the Monkey King Enma. After the initial discovery, Shaki had sent one of her birds to tell Hiruzen that he should come to the house to get a third opinion about what Naruto was doing with a simple academy jutsu. The Hokage was only too happy to leave his paperwork behind. Of course he wasn't thrilled when Naruto performed his just and turned into the Sandaime with a deformed face. You brought me all the way here to see this, he had said with a deadpan expression to the pair. The Sandaime's initial thoughts were forgotten when they told him about what they had already found about the Naruto's jutsu. After a number of tests, they had determined several things. It didn't seem to matter if the hand seals for the jutsu were switched or changed with others. Naruto was still able to perform the jutsu no matter the hand seals combinations, which meant that he was actually molding the chakra himself, and Naruto only needed a single hand seal to help him focus. Naruto favored the ram seal for this purpose, which was odd considering the hand seal sequence for the henge was dog, boar, tiger, and didn't include the ram seal. Thus, for some reason, Naruto was able to instinctively form the henge jutsu. Of course, he still needed practice to fix his problems with forming faces. They also found that Naruto's henge could break several preconceived notions concerning the jutsu. It was originally thought that only summons were able to use the henge to its fullest potential, as humans were not able to replicate what summons could do with the jutsu. For example, the Monkey King Enma was able to transform into an object, an adamantine staff, that was smaller than himself, weighed less, and could change its shape and properties, to something as hard as diamond. It was a known fact that humans were not able to reproduce that ability. Many had tried and failed. They found it impossible to henge into something smaller than themselves, to change their weight to match that of what they were transforming into, to change the shape of their henge without dispelling the technique, or to change the properties of the object they wanted to turn into. The best that humans could do was to transform into another person or a closed object of similar size, and humans were not able to ever change their weight or be handled while in a henge. Tsunade had taken it a step further and made her own version of the henge to hide her age and physically be a woman in her 20s. Normally, if a person changed into a crate, then they wouldn't actually be a crate. They had to crouch down and sit on a solid surface, and they couldn't mimic the material of the object they wanted to change into. If they were touched or lifted by a person, they would weigh the same as they had before the henge, and the henge would also disperse from the user, either losing focus or the layer of chakra being disturbed. The layer was rather flimsy and could be disrupted with a single touch by someone else. A summon, on the other hand, could literally change into an object and even harden that object like Enma could do. They could even partially emerge from the object or change the dimensions of the object. Enma was able to reach out with his arm from the staff he transformed into, and even move to some degree. He could also change his diameter and length in tandem with Hiruzen's attacks. From what they discovered, Naruto was able to perform these abilities, at least some of them. Naruto was able to change into a variety of smaller weapons that weighed exactly the same what the real weapons would. He couldn't change into something any larger than a tall person or any smaller than a pebble. This, however, was astounding, as no one had ever been able to accomplish something like that before. Naruto was succeeding without really trying, whereas others had failed after putting a good amount of time and effort. The only way to know that Naruto was transformed into a seemingly random object was to physically touch that object. It was also possible that an accomplished sensor could find him, but none of the veteran shinobi present in the yard could detect him while transformed into an object. Naruto didn't know how to increase his hardness to that of a diamond, but the weapons that he transformed into appeared to be made of metal and could actually be used as weapons. There were drawbacks to his object transformation, however, as Naruto wasn't able to change his shape while transformed, and he couldn't sprout an appendage from his transformed state. He was confined to the shape he transformed into, and there was also a limit to the dimensions he could take on. Naruto couldn't transform into something very narrow or very long, as well as a limit to the size and weight of whatever he would transform into. With more experimentation, they found that the clothes that Naruto created felt and behaved like actual clothes. The robe he made when he transformed into the Hokage felt and behaved like a real robe. To the watching grown-ups' amazement, Naruto could actually take off the hat and robes, but if they left his person, they would dispel in a poof of smoke. Probably the most interesting discovery was when Naruto attempted to transform into an animal and succeeded. Before that point, no one had ever been able to transform into a moving animal. They could mimic the shape of an animal similar in size to a human over their body, but never physically transform into an animal of their choosing as Naruto could. If he wanted to become a bird, Naruto could physically become a bird and even take flight after several tries. This astounded everyone else present. Naruto greatly enjoyed his newfound flight abilities as a hinged bird, and it took a great deal of coaxing from everyone present to get him back down to the ground. Needless to say, everyone was still rather amazed and confounded as to what Naruto had managed to accomplish. Unlike Naruto, they realized the significance and possible uses of such a technique. With training and practice, Naruto could potentially become one of the best infiltrators that the village had ever known. His usage of the Academy Jutsu, in some ways, surpassed that of summoning animals. Simply by accident, Naruto had surpassed any ninja who had ever used the jutsu before him. Shaki decided at that point to start Naruto's stealth and infiltration training a little earlier than she had planned. "Have you ever seen anything like that?" spoke Rayleigh to the Sandaime. Rayleigh may have been older, but the Sandaime was noted for his knowledge in the ninja world and had a great store of knowledge at his disposal. As such, he wanted the Sandaime's opinion before he started suggesting any theories of his own. As the Sandaime gave this question the proper thought, he did come across several similarities to people that he had or still did know in his life as a shinobi. "Well, I have seen some instances where something similar has happened before," stated the Sandaime, and he had the full, undivided attention of both Uzumaki. "I have seen instances where a ninja has shown great affinity for certain types of jutsu. For example, the ninja clans of this village each have techniques or affinities that they are predisposed to use better than another clan. The Uchiha have their affinity to fire, which is shared by nearly every member of the clan, past and present. Also the trio of Akamichi, Yamanaka, and Nara all have a specific affinity for a particular aspect of yin and yang manipulation jutsu." Both Uzumaki nodded at this, and the Sandaime continued, "I have also witnessed instances of a particular person having a special predisposition for particular jutsu that was not part of what the rest of the clan practiced. This was particularly evident in the Senju clan, who had great prowess not due to a bloodline or an affinity to a specific type of jutsu. Both Hashirama-sensei and Tobirama-sensei each had a particular affinity for certain jutsu. In the Shodai's case it was Wujutsu, which no one else had been able to use or replicate. The Nidaime possessed an incredibly powerful affinity for water jutsu, enough that he was able to pull moisture from the surrounding atmosphere. The only person who could ever come close to that affinity was Salamander Hanzo. Senju Toka was also someone who possessed a strong affinity for genjutsu, which was said to be even greater than many of the Uchiha clan or the Kurama clan, both of which are known for their genjutsu. One of my own students, Tsunade, also possessed an affinity for healing jutsu that has not been seen since. Of course, there are other examples outside of the village, such as the Sandaime Kazakage, who was known for his iron sand. The two people present absorbed this information as the Sandaime took a little break. They had also known most of this information, but it was good to refresh themselves. As to having an affinity for a single technique, there are many examples. Everyone has heard of ninja having great skill with a specific technique, such as silent killing, or a specific jutsu, but those are instances where that person has trained themselves until they were unrivaled in the skill. What Naruto has shown is an innate ability to use a specific jutsu with no prior knowledge or training. His henge is far more advanced than anyone I have ever heard of before, and I cannot believe how versatile his jutsu is. I would go as far as saying that the technique he is using is no longer the henge no jutsu. He is still having some trouble mastering the jutsu, but with the progress I saw today, he should master the jutsu by the end of the week," stated the Sandaime with a little awe in his voice over what Naruto had unknowingly done. "What rank would you give the jutsu?" "I would suppose that with the complexity of the jutsu and the fact that none of us were able to duplicate what Naruto-chan accomplished, that the jutsu should be labeled as a A rank. I could definitely feel Naruto-chan using far more chakra than the original technique requires, probably 3 or 4 times as much. However, that would be on the level of a C rank at best." Shaki asked the two men present. Of course, both men had very different thoughts on the subject. Rayleigh thought the jutsu should be labeled at least at A rank because if the jutsu was used to its fullest, it could be one of the most powerful and cunning infiltration jutsus known. Sarutobi, on the other hand, was a bit more conservative with his thoughts. He believed that the jutsu should be a C rank because, although Naruto was the only person capable of using it, an A rank was labeled on difficulty and chakra usage. The jutsu that Naruto had was only able to be used by him and could only be used effectively by a person of experience and who had been properly trained. At this point in time, The jutsu had great potential and was incredible, but it was a little much to think that it should be labeled at a higher rank. Both men voiced their opinions on the subject, and after much debate back and forth, Shaki decided that it was time to stop the discussion and stated, "Just label it a B rank and be done with it." Both men, not wanting to incur her wrath, agreed. Two people were walking down the crowded main street of Konoha towards the Hokage Tower. The taller man on the right was Rayleigh, and he was dressed how he usually dresses, though he decided to forego the usual cloak that he wears as it was the hotter months of the year. The shorter child on the left was wearing normal sandals, blue shorts, and a button-up orange vest. His hair was jet black and his face was partially covered by the shadow produced by the straw hat that he was wearing. He was also smiling, and he was also Uzumaki Naruto under a henge. This week he was disguised as Luffy, or what he envisioned as Luffy. The books don't have illustrations, only descriptions. When Naruto walked through the village while disguised, he always thought that it was a very odd place. Everyone was completely different when he went around the village while disguised, compared with if he walked around without a henge. If he didn't have the henge, people would notice him and then the usual things would happen. "I don't understand them," thought Naruto. "They would always start glaring at him. I really hate the way they look at me," he continued in his thoughts. Most would avoid him entirely like he was the plague. Then the whispering would start. "Don't they know that I can hear them?" he wondered. They called him a monster and demon or fox. Only 5 people in the village actually called him Naruto. He was never let into any of the stores or restaurants, and they kicked him out if he tried. There were also several incidents when someone would take things farther and shout things, throw things, or actually physically assault him. The assaulting was mostly used to threaten him. They would push him down or purposefully run into him, and then blame him for it. "I didn't do anything to them. It won't be long before I can fight back and defend myself," he imagined. Only when drunk would the villagers actually try and attack him. Ray-sensei said this happens the worst near my birthday. Rayleigh and occasionally Shaki made sure Naruto never left his house during the time around his birthday. Every year people would drink heavily around that time and a mob would form that would go off looking for the boy, though they never found him. Ninja and civilian alike would occasionally try and follow Naruto back to where he was hiding, but they would always black out and wake up in a dumpster, courtesy of Rayleigh. It was very different on the days when Shaki went with or followed Naruto. Those individuals would end up in the hospital for an extended period of time. So far the Uchiha military police had no leads on the unknown assailant, and weren't close to finding or catching the person. Shaki had perfected her beating technique to such levels that she could cause short-term memory loss on her victims, and they would forget that they ever encountered her. Of course, Naruto knew exactly why they did this, as both guardians had informed him. He just couldn't understand how people that were so nice and peaceful when he was disguised could turn into such mean and terrible people when he walked around without a disguise. It didn't make sense. He had been observing the people in the village for months and he was no closer to finding out why they acted like they did. While Rayleigh did allow Naruto to go out alone, he would always follow the boy and made sure that nothing happened. Living your life while always underneath a disguise was no way to live. There had been a few instances where someone had tried to attack Naruto, but the blonde was very resourceful and fast. He always managed to get away from any pursuers. The silence was broken between the two as they lazily made their way to the red tower ahead of them. "So, how many people have you seen wearing standard ninja sandals?" asked Rayleigh to the shorter figure. The shorter figure glanced up and took a look around at their current area. After some thought, he said, 42 people, Ray-sensei. Rayleigh nodded at the correct answer and asked another question. In the past few months, this had become a standard part of what they did in the early afternoon, 3 times a week. Rayleigh and an advanced henge Naruto would walk through the village and Naruto would be asked questions about different things around them. Naruto would have to observe and memorize what he saw during these excursions and provide answers to the questions that Rayleigh asked. These questions were geared towards helping Naruto with his observation and memory skills, and Naruto found the activity rather difficult at first but was progressing. This exercise had started the previous year with memorizing items in the pantry and house but had now evolved into a much larger area. After months of training, Naruto was finally able to memorize every item in their pantry and figure out what items in the house had been moved from the previous day. After accomplishing these tasks to a degree that Rayleigh found acceptable, the difficulty was increased. Sometimes they would go into stores or restaurants, and Rayleigh would question Naruto about the people sitting or standing around them, and he wouldn't let Naruto turn around or look around himself. This was to build situational awareness of the people around Naruto. Rayleigh would even ask how many ninja were around them, both on and off duty. Naruto found this particularly difficult, especially since he couldn't sense chakra. This meant that he would have to identify off-duty ninja based on how they moved or acted, or perhaps features. It was rather easy to spot individuals from certain clans as they all looked alike or were easily identifiable. It was much more difficult to spot a ninja in civilian clothing that didn't belong to a clan or wasn't readily identifiable. Naruto often couldn't spot these individuals. After getting back home, Rayleigh would lecture and explain the best ways to spot them on the next trip they took into the village. On one of these excursions, they had discovered Ichiraku ramen. Well, Naruto had discovered the small ramen shop and Rayleigh just ate there again. Of course, once Naruto had discovered ramen, he wanted to eat ramen every day. The owner, Tucci, was overjoyed considering the amount of ramen that Naruto could eat in one sitting. Naruto also didn't have to use his henge while sitting inside the small ramen stand, as either Tucci or his daughter Ayame cared who Naruto was. He also took off his mask when he entered the stand. Since Naruto had made friends, Rayleigh had agreed that they could come back once a week. However, this eventually turned into 4 times a week, but Naruto still ate more nutritional meals. They just made room for ramen. Rayleigh wanted Naruto to eat healthy, but the blonde had found people that didn't think badly of him for the burden that he carried, and Rayleigh wanted Naruto to have some people to talk with besides Shaki, the Sandaime, and himself. Especially since Naruto still wasn't able to make any friends in the village. All of Naruto's training had advanced in the years since he started learning his first academy jutsu. He had already learned how to tree walk, and Rayleigh had found ways to make the jutsu more difficult by having Naruto perform tasks while tree walking or perform the leaf concentration/spinning exercise while tree walking. Rayleigh wasn't happy until tree walking was second nature to Naruto. Naruto's physical training had progressed as well. Rayleigh had Naruto training with his swords and using the Uzumaki style of taijutsu. Rayleigh had the blonde go through grueling workouts that, more often than not, left Naruto a panting, sweaty mess on the ground after he was finished. For his part, Naruto didn't complain or ask Rayleigh to go easier on him. From reading those books for so long, all that Naruto wanted to do was get stronger and find nakama. Unfortunately, while he was slowly getting stronger, he had yet to find any friends. Both men were brought out of their musings when they reached the open area with the Hokage tower just ahead of them. "How many ninja are guarding the area within 100 meters around us?" Rayleigh asked to break the silence and continue the training exercise. The disguised Naruto looked around the open area. He easily spotted the guards that were on duty in the area. They were placed by the doors to the tower, and there were several patrolling the area. Naruto quickly gave an answer of 12, Ray-sensei. Rayleigh smiled but responded with, "Nope. There are 16 ninja around us." Naruto surveyed the scene again. "I only see 12. Where are the other 4? Thought Naruto. "So where are the other ones?" Naruto asked Rayleigh while looking around the clearing in front of the Hokage tower. Rayleigh smiled and answered, "An ANBU squad hidden in the trees." Naruto pouted. It wasn't his fault he couldn't see them then. "That's not fair." He voiced his objection. Rayleigh merely laughed at the disguised child walking next to him. "That's tough, you lost. Life isn't fair, and you shouldn't think that it should be. Since you lost, you have to wash the dishes after dinner," Rayleigh said while still smiling, and he could hear Naruto mumble something about always having to do the dishes. They began making wagers on exercises like this. If Naruto wasn't successful, then he would have to do extra chores. Of course, Rayleigh didn't miss a chance to do less work, and he made sure to win the wager. He then passed it off to Naruto as a challenge to get better and work harder. Rayleigh told himself that he was trying to teach Naruto a lesson, but he also didn't want to do any of those chores. "Now, while I'm talking with Sarutobi-san, you can sit in the waiting room or something. Just don't get lost," said Rayleigh to the person next to him. "Why couldn't I have just stayed at home? I have books there I could be reading," replied the disguised Naruto. "Do you remember the last time I left you alone in the apartment?" intoned Rayleigh with a frown. The sheepish look on the man next to him told Rayleigh everything he needed to know. The last time he had left Naruto at home, while he went out to the store, he arrived home to the smoke alarms going off and to find that the drapes in the kitchen along with a pot on the stove were ablaze. Apparently Naruto was hungry and wanted to make himself something to eat. The blonde had watched Rayleigh cook many times but was unprepared for actually doing it himself. After that, Naruto was not allowed near the stove or in the house alone. The pair entered the Hokage building and proceeded to the office of the Hokage. Naruto had to wait outside on one of the benches while Rayleigh went inside. Naruto had made sure to stay away from the secretary that was on the same floor. "I really should have brought something to read with me," thought Naruto disdainfully as he proceeded to count the ceiling tiles. Hokage's office. Rayleigh eased himself into one of the chairs in front of the Hokage's desk while the Sandaime finished filling out the paperwork that he was currently working on. While he still had disagreements with the Sandaime, Rayleigh was focused on raising and training Naruto. He didn't have time to hold a grudge against the Hokage for what had happened after Naruto was born. Rayleigh also didn't like having to tell the Hokage about Naruto's training and progress every week. Once finished, the Hokage began the meeting. "Sorry about this, but I just haven't been able to leave the office at all since the Hyuga affair, Hinata's kidnapping attempt, and that was nearly 6 months ago," said the weary Hokage while rubbing his eyes. Rayleigh nodded in understanding. The backlash from that event had escalated tensions between the Leaf and Cloud, and there was seemingly no end to the paperwork and problems. Village security was again investigated. The Sandaime had been in numerous meetings with the council and the Hyuga clan, and not to mention the negotiations and politics of the whole matter. The Sandaime hadn't been able to visit Naruto, but he was also busy with the birth of his grandson Konohamaru, and hadn't been able to hear any updated on Naruto's progress in his training. Because of the situation with Naruto, the Sandaime didn't want any reports or paperwork of any kind concerning the boy's training, as the blonde was supposed to be in the care of the orphanage. With the current problems in the village, Naruto had been all but forgotten about by the Shinobi Council. The only news about Naruto's progress that the Sandaime received was when he went to visit and conversed with Rayleigh. This usually took quite some time as the Sandaime was very interested in the boy's progress, especially after the discovery of his unique henge. Unfortunately, with the Sandaime's busy schedule as it was, he wasn't able to visit Naruto long enough to speak with Rayleigh in several months. That was the main reason he had set aside this time for a meeting. Well, so far I have been increasing Naruto-kun's physical exercises like we talked about. The Sandaime nodded at this and Rayleigh inwardly smirked as he had been increasing Naruto's physical training regime faster than they had agreed upon and proceeded. And he is progressing well with the basic academy taijutsu style, and very well with the Uzumaki taijutsu style. The Sandaime smiled at this. The Uzumaki style, known as the whirlpool fist, was a hard style similar to the strong fist style used by Might Guy. I've also been working on his dexterity, agility, and how to recover from throws and falls. We've been practicing with the basic ninja tools and he is showing steady improvement. I haven't taught him any more jutsu at this point, seeing as he is still working on using and mastering the jutsu that I have given him so far, which include the clone technique, the body replacement technique, his advanced henge, the shadow shuriken technique, basic wire and shuriken manipulation, the rope escape technique, and the cloak of invisibility technique," said Rayleigh as he finished listing off the techniques that Naruto could perform. The Sandaime nodded at the list, seeing as Naruto's training was advancing quite nicely. "Since Naruto-kun has already completed the tree walking exercise, I plan to teach him water walking in the near future," continued Rayleigh. The Sandaime was rather shocked at this since the water walking exercise was really for Genin or Chunin, but before he could object, Rayleigh said, "Naruto-kun already has high Genin chakra reserves, Sarutobi-san. It would be a waste to not train him when he is already ready." After giving it some thought, the Sandaime agreed with this. "He's also progressed very well in his kenjutsu, and I am teaching him a style that was used in Yuzushio. I want to start him working on basic shape manipulation and chakra flow exercises a little later in the year. I learned many different techniques from my time in Iron Country with the samurai there, and I bet they could be very useful to Naruto." The Sandaime was again shocked by this. The samurai of Iron Country were nothing to joke about, and it was unheard of for a ninja to be able to learn anything from them. They kept their techniques and training secret from everyone. It was quite surprising that Rayleigh knew any of those techniques. Of course, the Sandaime wasn't about to deny Naruto the chance to learn something like what Rayleigh was proposing and nodded in agreement, though he did think they would be too advanced for Naruto. "Next week I will to start teaching Naruto-kun the basics of Fuinjutsu and the Uzumaki Fuinjutsu. If he is anything like his mother, and so far he definitely is, then he will be quite skilled in our clan's Fuinjutsu, and I should start training him as soon as possible," concluded Rayleigh. "I also wanted to know where would be the best place to start working on survival, tracking, and basic trap training with Naruto," inquired Rayleigh. The Sandaime thought about this. Rayleigh had asked to use Training Ground 43 several years prior, but the Sandaime didn't want Naruto anywhere near Training Ground 44, which had been dubbed the Forest of Death. Technically, only Konoha ninja were allowed to use any of the training grounds within or outside of the Leaf Village. Some of the ninja clans had their own private training grounds, and in the Nara clan's case, an area for their deer to graze outside of the village. The problem was finding a training ground that no really went to and where there was little chance of someone observing Rayleigh training Naruto. "I suppose you can use any training ground that is open, but you'll have to make sure that no one sees either of you training there," said the Hokage, and he asked a question of his own. "How is Naruto-kun's training with Shaki-san going?" asked the Hokage. The Sandaime had hardly seen the woman in months, and he was curious what she was teaching Naruto or planned on teaching him in the near future. Although Rayleigh kept a straight face on the outside, on the inside it was a different story. He really wasn't sure what exactly to tell the Hokage. There were obvious things that he would tell the Hokage, but there were others that he did not want to inform the Hokage about. "Let's see," he stalled for time while thinking. "I shouldn't tell Sarutobi-san about Shaki teaching Naruto-kun about the different pressure points or about the different methods to break and dislocate someone's arms, legs, and hands. I also definitely can't tell him about Shaki using low doses of poisons on the boy to develop his immunity to the most common types," were the thoughts racing through Rayleigh's mind. We already have his reading and writing down to a good level, so she started focusing on other things. After the discovery of his unique henge, she started working on basic stealth, espionage, and infiltration. She's also teaching him basics on anatomy," added Rayleigh after a little break. "Oh, any particular subject of anatomy?" inquired the Hokage as he was curious and a little hesitant to know the answer. Shaki definitely knew her way around injuring the human body. "Lots of things, I guess. I don't really sit in on their lessons, so it could be lots of different things," answered Rayleigh a little hesitantly and with a half-truth. "Do I even want to know what she's teaching Naruto-kun?" thought the Sandaime, and a long silence settled between them. Both men decided it was better to change the subject than continue where they had stopped, and the conversation switched to casual talk about other things. Of course, Rayleigh had forgotten that Naruto was still waiting outside of the office in the hallway. He also forgot that Naruto gets bored very easily outside the office. "Oh, I'm bored," Naruto groaned out while rubbing his eyes. He had been sitting on the bench that Rayleigh had left him on for hours. At least that is what he assumed, as he couldn't see a clock and didn't have a watch. In actuality, it had been less than 15 minutes. Naruto had dispelled his henge and was laying down on the bench. Originally he had been sitting, but the bench wasn't very comfortable and he had been changing positions every few minutes. It was in this position that he noticed something on the ceiling that he had overlooked when he was counting the ceiling tiles. It was an ordinary vent for the air ducts that ran throughout the building. He was bored and this new discovery had caught his attention. From first glance, he could tell that the vent was too small to properly fit him inside. It was a ninja building after all, and it would be stupid to have air ducts that a person could fit inside and travel in. However, this did not impede Naruto in the slightest because he had a henge that was superior to all others. This looks promising, the young Uzumaki thought. Smiling, Naruto got up from the bench and inspected the vent on the ceiling. Nodding to himself, he walked up the wall, onto the ceiling, and started removing the metal plate covering the air duct. Once the cover was open, he made the ram sign for his henge. When the smoke had cleared, a small monkey had taken Naruto's place. It was normal looking if not overly cute. The reason Naruto had chosen a monkey was mostly for its human-like hands and specifically for the opposable thumbs the creature possessed. Climbing into the vent, the monkey turned around and put the vent back into place as best as it could. Looking around the new area, Naruto chose a direction and scampered along the metal of the duct to an unknown destination. The darkness wasn't an issue for Naruto because he had excellent night vision. To him, the vent didn't seem very dark at all. Trying his best, Naruto stayed away from the Sandame's office. There was no point in being discovered this early in his big adventure. On his unknown path, Naruto passed many other vents and observed many people doing various things. He passed by one room with several ninja behind tables handing out scrolls. He almost stopped in to try and get one but didn't want to get caught. He did wonder exactly what were on the scrolls though. He also passed by a bathroom, several dark rooms with file cabinets, and a janitor's closet. Right when he had decided to turn around the head back, he came upon another room. This one was full of books, and seeing as Naruto loved stories, he decided to have a look. Examining the room as best as he could from the vent, he decided that no one was around. Putting chakra to his hands, Naruto stuck his palm to the vent and pushed it open. Walking out of the vent, the monkey replaced the vent cover and examined the room. And this is the same room that Konohamaru barricaded himself into in the anime. It was smaller than the Sandame's office and also featured a desk in the middle of the room. This desk was not covered with papers like the Sandame's. It was completely clean with only a single lamp sighting on it. Surrounding the desk were numerous filled bookshelves on each wall. The room had no windows. Changing back into himself, Naruto went over to the light switch and turned on the lights in the room. He could see in the dark but would have had difficulty reading the titles of the books. He proceeded to the closest shelf and started examining the titles. After browsing several bookshelves and innumerable books, he decided that this collection was very boring. Mostly old medical, history, geography, and jutsu books, he thought and frowned. He thought maybe the jutsu books were interesting, but they all had some crazy stuff inside about kenjutsu and death. They just weren't what he was looking for. He wanted a story, or at least something that wasn't so out of his reading ability and utterly boring. Rei-sensei probably hasn't stopped talking to Hokage yet. Once those old guys get going, it's hard to get them to stop, thought the bored boy. Naruto wasn't one to give up though, and he was determined to find something that he could read. As he made his way to the M section, he passed over the last of the medical texts that he stopped as his mind caught up with his browsing. He moved back 2 titles and stared at what he saw. It was an old book, very old indeed. Thick and leather-bound, rather worn too. The title on the spine could still be read, and that was what Naruto was trying to comprehend. The Memoirs of Roronoa Zoro was what the book said for the title. That can't be. Shaki Bakon and Rei-sensei both said that those books were just stories and not real, thought Naruto disbelievingly. Naruto continued to stare at the anomalous book in front of him, and right at his fingertips. Based on what his grandparents had told him, Naruto's mind started making up an explanation for the title. Maybe someone was named Roronoa Zoro in the elemental countries. They could have been named after the character in the book. I'm named after a character in the Tales of the Gutsy Ninja. Maybe they are named after the Zoro from my books. Of course, thoughts like that only made him want to examine the book more closely. His heart was beating rather fast from excitement. This could be something amazing, or it could be nothing at all. Placing both hands on the spine of the book, he gently tugged it free from its resting place and hauled it back to the desk in the room. He lifted the thick book over his head. Despite nearly falling over backwards, he still managed to push the book onto the desk. Climbing into the chair, he faced the desk and was about to begin his thorough inspection of this artifact when he realized something and scowled. He was too short to properly see over the desk while sitting in the chair. Jumping out of the chair, Naruto went to the thickest of the medical texts and dragged 2 over to the chair. With some heavy lifting, he managed to get both into the chair to sit on. Climbing back into the chair, he scowled again as he faced the desk. The chair was too far away from the desk for his short arms to even reach the book. Jumping out of the chair, he went to the back and started pushing it closer to the desk. I really shouldn't have picked the thickest and heaviest books I could find. This chair weighs a ton and is even harder to push. I hate being small. Maybe I should have just examined it on the floor and not the desk, thought the frustrated and annoyed boy. After finally getting everything ready for his big inspection, Naruto climbed up the armrest and into his new high chair. Looking forward, he looked to the cover of the book. The cover was well worn but blank. It contained no title or author. The book did not smell like mold or mildew like several of the other texts in the room. Gently flipping over the cover, Naruto examined the first page. The page was frayed at the edges as all of the preceding pages seemed to be. It only bore the same title on the spine and nothing more. Naruto flipped the page and examined the second page. This page had a dedication to Kuina. I kept our promise and completed our dream. The journey lies in these pages. RZ. Naruto stared for some time at these words. His mouth was open and his eyes were wide. He read the dedication several times. Each time he came to the same conclusion. He was real. She was real. This is real. He realized and still couldn't believe what he was holding. His breathing was heavy and labored. What was sitting in front of him shouldn't be real. It shouldn't exist. Both his guardians told him that it was just a story. The crew of that sailing ship didn't exist. He wanted it to be real. He wanted those pirates to exist. Naruto would often imagine himself as part of the crew or from Zoro's perspective on board the ship. In his imagination, he had a group of great friends who cared for each other and had great adventures. This, of course, was the opposite of the real world, in which he had no friends and was too young for great adventures. Not even bothering to flip the page and continue reading, Naruto closed the book. What he needed right now was affirmation. He needed to find Rayleigh and get him to see what he had found. Naruto was very confused and needed to know what was going on. Getting down from the chair, Naruto took the book and went to the door of the study. He needed to get to the Sandame's office. He needed to know if this book was real. Naruto didn't bother to put the medical text that he had been sitting on back onto the shelves. He was on a mission now and nothing was going to stop him. Bursting through the doors of the study, Naruto came face to face with two patrolling guards. Oh crap, he thought, and started running toward the Sandame's office right as both guards noticed him. They also noticed where he was coming from and that he had stolen something. Stop right there! Yelled one of the guards, but Naruto just ran as fast as he could. Having some idea where he was, Naruto remembered that he had gone down a floor when he was in the vents, and therefore the Sandame's office had to be on the floor above him. He needed to get to the staircase. Thinking fast, Naruto gathered chakra into his feet and started running along the wall, and then the ceiling. The Chunin guards weren't perturbed by this at all and were nearly upon him despite the maneuver. While still holding the book tightly in his arms, Naruto jumped off the ceiling towards the ground and made a single-hand seal and created as many clones of himself as he could in the hallway. Since the clones had no substance to them, they dispelled as soon as they came in contact with the guards. However, the dispelling created a useful smoke screen. Gotcha! Said one of the Chunins as he reached forward through the smoke and grabbed what he thought was the boy. When the smoke dispelled enough for guard to see, he was holding a 3-foot-tall potted plant. A potted plant that, just a moment before, had been siding near the door to the staircase. Hee. Naruto laughed to himself as he ascended the stairs towards his destination on the next floor. His laughter stopped, however, as the door to the stairwell opened and the guards began ascending the stairs as well. Apparently they had heard the door to the stairwell shut and instantly knew where he had gone. Naruto's head start was shortened drastically by the faster pursuers as he exited the stairwell door and ran along the hallway to the Sandame's office. Not a second later the door to the stairwell was opened again by the pursuing Chunin.